The gunshot echoed across the Wyoming mountains, shattering the brittle winter silence. A man staggered toward the cabin, clutching his chest, as crimson bloomed across his white shirt. His boots left uneven tracks in the snow, each step weaker than the last. Claire Matthews stood on the porch, the Winchester rifle still smoking in her trembling hands. Her face, once delicate with Boston refinement, was now hardened by frontier life and resolve. Behind her, a child's sobbing filtered through the cabin's half-open door. In the distance, hoofbeats faded as the attackers fled into the gathering dusk. For a moment, Claire stood paralyzed, watching the wounded man collapse face first into the blood-stained snow. The cold Wyoming wind whipped her dark hair across her face, but she didn't flinch. She had known colder things. 3 days earlier. Boston, 1889. The society column of the Boston Herald lay open on the mahogany desk, the headline still able to draw blood 6 months after publication. Evans-Malloy engagement terminated judge's daughter, jilts senator's son. Claire Evans, 28, stared at the words until they blurred. 6 months, and the humiliation remained as fresh as yesterday's bread. What the paper didn't report, what no respectable publication would dare print, was that she hadn't jilted anyone. She had discovered the truth. "Miss Evans," the housekeeper's voice broke through her thoughts. "There's a gentleman here from the bank." Claire folded the newspaper, tucking it into her desk drawer alongside dozens of similar clippings. "Send him in, Martha." The man who entered wasn't from any bank. Claire recognized him immediately, one of Senator Malloy's associates, a thin-lipped man with eyes like cold steel. "Miss Evans." He didn't bother removing his hat. "The senator requests your presence this evening." Claire squared her shoulders. "Tell Senator Malloy that I have nothing to discuss with him. The debt collectors have already taken everything of value." The man's smile never reached his eyes. "Not everything, Miss Evans. You still possess something of great value." His gaze traveled down her figure with deliberate slowness. "The senator believes a suitable arrangement could be made. His son still finds you appealing despite your circumstances." Claire's hand curled around the letter opener on her desk. "Get out. Think carefully, Miss Evans. Your father's debts didn't die with him. The senator can make your life very comfortable or exceedingly difficult." After he left, Claire moved to the window, watching as the man's carriage pulled away from what had once been the grandest home on Beacon Hill. Now it stood nearly empty, the furniture sold to pay her father's creditors after his suicide. Judge James Evans, once Boston's most respected jurist, had put a pistol to his temple 3 months ago when financial ruin threatened. The scandal that followed revealed that the esteemed judge had lost everything in a series of ill-advised investments orchestrated by none other than Charles Malloy, Senator Malloy's son, the man Claire had been engaged to marry. But it wasn't the financial disaster that had driven her father to suicide. It was the shame of discovery not just of his financial folly, but of how deeply he'd been manipulated. Claire moved to the portrait of her father that still hung above the fireplace, the one thing she had refused to sell. "I'll make this right," she whispered to the stern face that had once commanded Boston's highest court. "I promise." From the hidden compartment behind the portrait, she removed a leather portfolio. Inside were documents she had discovered in Charles's study the night before she'd broken their engagement documents that revealed a weapons smuggling operation that supplied guns to both sides of conflicts across the border. Senator Malloy and his son were using their shipping company as a front, with profits laundered through various enterprises, including the very investments that had ruined her father. These papers were her only leverage and her greatest danger. The Malloys knew she had them, which explained why they hadn't simply foreclosed on the house. They needed those documents back, and they were willing to turn her into Charles's mistress to get them. Claire returned to her desk and unfolded the newspaper that had arrived that morning. She flipped past the front page with its news of railroad expansions and silver prices, past the society pages she once frequented to the back, where advertisements crowded together like desperate immigrants seeking space. One small notice caught her eye: matrimonial. Honest man widowed seeks kind woman to raise his daughter and share a quiet life. Silver Creek, Wyoming territory. Inquire Box 219. Boston Post. Claire read it 3 times. Wyoming. As far from Boston and the Malloys as one could get without falling into the Pacific. A place where no one knew her name or her shame. With trembling fingers, she pulled out a sheet of paper and began to write. Silver Creek, Wyoming territory. 3 months later. The train whistle pierced the winter air as the locomotive slowed into Silver Creek Station. Claire pressed her gloved hand against the frozen window, taking in her first glimpse of the town that would be her sanctuary. It was smaller than she'd expected, a clutch of wooden buildings huddled against the vast Wyoming wilderness like survivors of a shipwreck. Snow blanketed everything pristine white, broken only by the dark smudges of horse tracks and boot prints. Mountains loomed in the distance, jagged teeth against a steel-gray sky. "End of the line, miss," the conductor announced, opening the compartment door. "Silver Creek." Claire gathered her single valise, all that remained of her possessions after selling everything to fund her escape. The silver watch in her pocket, her father's last gift to her, was the only item of value she had kept. "Will someone be meeting you?" the conductor asked, helping her navigate the narrow corridor of the train. "Yes," Claire lied, straightening her shoulders. "My fiancé." The platform was nearly deserted as Claire stepped down from the train. A few men loitered near the station house, their eyes following her with undisguised curiosity. A woman in fine Eastern clothes was clearly a novelty in Silver Creek. "Miss Evans," she hoped to hear, but no one approached. Claire took a seat on a bench outside the station, arranging her skirts as if she were merely waiting for someone momentarily delayed. The cold seeped through her coat, fashionable in Boston, but woefully inadequate for Wyoming's brutal winter. Hours passed. The station master locked up for the night, casting a pitying glance her way. "No one coming for you, miss?" "He'll be here," Claire assured him, her voice steady despite the doubt creeping into her heart. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding about the train's arrival. The man shrugged. "You can wait inside till morning if you like. Wouldn't recommend spending the night out here." But Claire remained on the bench. Eli Matthews had responded to her letter with warm enthusiasm, describing his small silver mine, his 7-year-old daughter Mara, and the cabin he had built with his own hands. His penmanship had been rough but sincere, his words honest and direct. She had sent her photograph. He had promised to meet her train. Yet here she sat alone, as the temperature dropped and stars emerged in the vast Wyoming sky. Morning came, and still no Eli Matthews. Claire ventured into town, asking directions to a boarding house where she took a room, claiming her fiancé had been delayed by mining business. She bathed, changed her clothes, and returned to the station to wait. The second day passed without sign of him. Claire's funds were dwindling rapidly. The boarding house wasn't cheap, and she had spent nearly everything on the train journey west. On the third day, she heard talk in town about silver barons from back east buying up claims. The name Silver Summit Mining Corporation was mentioned with a mixture of hope and resentment. Some townspeople believed the company would bring prosperity. Others feared it would swallow the independent miners whole. "They're offering cash for claims," a bearded man told his companion at the general store where Claire was pricing necessities. "Old Jensen sold yesterday." Got enough to move to Denver live like a king. Eli Matthews won't sell, his friend replied. Too stubborn by half. Says that claims his future, his daughter's future. Claire's heart quickened. Excuse me, she interrupted. Did you say Eli Matthews? Do you know where I might find him? The men exchanged glances. His place is about 4 miles north of town up Silver Creek. Can't miss it, only cabin with a red door. But I wouldn't go calling if I were you, miss. Matthews keeps to himself since his wife died. Not much for company. By the third afternoon, Claire had made her decision. She would sell her father's watch, her last connection to her former life, and purchase a ticket back east. Boston held dangers, but at least they were familiar ones. Better the devil you know, her father used to say. She was sitting on the station bench one final time, turning the silver watch over in her hands when she heard it, the sound of small boots running across the platform, followed by a child's voice high and clear. That's her. That's the lady from the picture. Claire looked up to see a little girl racing toward her, chestnut braids flying beneath a woolen bonnet, cheeks flushed with cold and excitement. The child couldn't be more than 7, her coat too large for her small frame, but her eyes, deep blue and intelligent, burned with something like triumph. Behind her, a tall man followed his stride, long and purposeful. He wore a heavy sheepskin coat dusted with snow, a worn Stetson pulled low over his brow. His face was weathered by sun and wind, his jaw set in a firm line beneath several days' growth of beard. The girl skidded to a stop directly in front of Claire. It's her, Pa. It's the lady I told you about. She turned back to the man tugging his sleeve. See, she looks just like Ma in the picture. The man removed his hat, revealing hair the same chestnut as his daughter's. His eyes also blue, but darker, like twilight, studied Claire with confusion. Ma'am, he began cautiously, I believe there's been some misunderstanding. I'm Eli Matthews. This is my daughter, Mara. Claire stood her legs unsteady. Mr. Matthews, I'm Claire Evans. I arrived 3 days ago. We corresponded. Her voice lifted in question as doubt clouded his features. Eli shook his head. I'm afraid I've never written to anyone named Claire Evans, ma'am. The platform seemed to tilt beneath Claire's feet. Another deception, another betrayal. But I have your letters. You wrote about your silver mine, your daughter. Pa didn't write any letters. Mara interrupted, her small face suddenly anxious. I did. Silence fell between them, broken only by the distant whistle of a departing train. Eli crouched beside his daughter, his expression a mixture of disbelief and growing comprehension. Mara, what have you done? The girl twisted her mittens together. I asked Mrs. Dallow to help me write to the newspaper in Boston. I told her what to say. She glanced up at Claire. I put Ma's picture in the envelope. Mrs. Dallow, the school teacher, Eli's voice rose. Mara, why would you? Because I need a mother. The child's voice cracked. Everyone else has one. I'm the only girl in school without a mother. And you're always at the mine, and when you come home, you're too tired to talk. And she broke off, tears spilling down her cheeks. Eli looked stricken. He turned to Claire, genuine remorse in his eyes. Miss Evans, I can't begin to apologize for this deception. My daughter had no right to bring you all this way under false pretenses. Claire felt lightheaded. The cold, the hunger, the exhaustion of the past 3 days crashed over her. I have nowhere to go, she said simply. I've spent everything I had to come here. Eli straightened, rubbing the back of his neck. He looked at his daughter, then back at Claire. Something in his expression shifted, not quite softening but resolving. "We can offer you a place to stay until you decide what to do next," he said finally. "It's the least we can do, considering—" Claire hesitated. This man was a stranger, not the correspondent she had come to know through letters. And yet, she had nowhere else to turn. The next train east wouldn't arrive for days, and her funds were nearly depleted. "Just until I can make other arrangements," she agreed. Ely nodded once, then reached for her valise. "It's a 4-mile ride. I hope you don't mind sharing a horse." As they left the station, Mara chattering excitedly, Ely leading the horse with Claire perched awkwardly behind him, none of them noticed the well-dressed man watching from the window of the Silver Summit Mining Company office across the street. He observed their departure with narrowed eyes, then turned to the telegram in his hand. "Confirm Evans' woman arrived. Stop. Acquire by any means. Stop. Meloy Badiyilieg." The Matthews cabin stood on a small rise overlooking Silver Creek, a sturdy structure of logs chinked with mud and moss. True to the description Claire had heard in town, its door was painted a faded red, the color of heart's blood against the white snow. "It's not much," Ely said as he helped her dismount, "but it's solid. Keeps the cold out mostly." Inside the cabin was simply furnished, but clean. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, its embers glowing faintly. A rough-hewn table with 4 chairs stood in the center of the main room. Curtains, faded but neatly pressed, separated the sleeping areas. "You can have my bed," Mara announced, pulling Claire toward the smaller curtained space. "I'll sleep with Pa." "Mara," Eli's voice held a warning. "Miss Evans will take the cot by the fire. It's where we put guests." Claire glimpsed hurt in the child's eyes before Mara nodded and retreated behind her curtain. Left alone with Ely, Claire felt the weight of the awkward silence between them. He moved to stoke the fire, his back to her shoulders, tense beneath his coat. "Mr. Matthews," she began, "I should explain—" "No need." He straightened, still not looking at her. "You were deceived. It's not your fault. Nevertheless, I feel I should tell you why I responded to what I thought was your advertisement." Claire swallowed hard. "I'm not some desperate spinster seeking a husband. I was engaged in Boston. It ended badly." Ely turned then, his expression unreadable in the firelight. "Miss Evans, your reasons are your own. You can stay until you sort things out. I won't pry." Something in his tone not unkind, but reserved, as if he were building a wall between them, made Claire straighten her spine. "I should tell you that I can earn my keep. I notice your daughter mentioned you're often at your mine. I could teach her while you work. I was educated at Miss Porter's school." A flicker of interest crossed his face. Mara's had spotty schooling at best. Mrs. Dallow tries, but with 20 children of all ages. Then it's settled. I'll tutor her in exchange for room and board until I can arrange passage back east. Ely studied her for a long moment. "There's one more thing," he said finally. "If you're staying here, you need to learn to use this." He moved to the wall and took down a Winchester rifle. "Wyoming Territory isn't Boston. There are dangers here, both animal and human." Claire eyed the weapon, remembering her father's hunting rifles that had been sold to pay his debts. "I've handled firearms before. My father taught me to shoot when I was 12. Something like approval flashed in Eli's eyes. "Good. We'll practice tomorrow." He returned the rifle to its pegs. "Get some rest, Miss Evans. Morning comes early here." After he disappeared behind his curtain, Claire sat on the edge of the cot, the events of the day swirling through her mind. She had traveled thousands of miles based on a child's deception, fleeing one danger only to land in uncertainty. Yet something about this place, the solidity of the cabin, the vastness of the sky she had glimpsed from horseback, even the gruff honesty of Eli Matthews, felt more real than anything she had known in Boston. She was arranging her few belongings when she noticed something on the small table beside her cot, a map hand-drawn on yellowed paper. It showed Silver Creek and the surrounding mountains with an X marked Matthew's Claim. But what caught her eye was the notation beside it. Mother Lode. Claire traced the words with her fingertip. Was this the future the men in town had mentioned? The reason Eli Matthews wouldn't sell to Silver Summit. A vein of silver so rich it was worth holding out against the pressure of a mining corporation. A noise from Mara's curtained alcove interrupted her thoughts. Claire moved quietly to check on the child and found her curled on her narrow bed, eyes open and glistening with tears. "I'm sorry," Mara whispered. "I didn't mean to trick you. I just wanted—" Claire sat on the edge of the bed. "I understand wanting something so badly, you'd do almost anything to get it." Mara wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "Are you going to leave?" "Not right away," Claire answered honestly. "I need to earn money for my ticket home." "Do you have a little girl waiting for you in Boston?" The question was like a knife to Claire's heart. "No, I don't have anyone waiting for me." Mara sat up, her expression suddenly hopeful. "Then maybe you could stay, just for a little while. I could show you the creek where the silver comes from and the place where the wild horses drink and—" "Mara!" Eli's voice came from beyond the curtain. "Let Miss Evans rest. It's late." Reluctantly, Mara lay back down. Claire tucked the blankets around her thin shoulders. "Sleep now. We'll talk more tomorrow." As she returned to her cot, Claire noticed Eli standing by his curtain, watching her with an unreadable expression. Their eyes met briefly before he disappeared back into his room. Claire lay awake long into the night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the Wyoming wilderness, the moan of wind through pine trees, the distant howl of a wolf, the creak of the cabin's timbers as they contracted in the cold. So different from Boston's crowded streets and constant noise. Eventually, exhaustion overcame her, and she drifted into uneasy sleep. She dreamed of her father standing at the edge of a silver creek, pointing to something in the water that gleamed like truth. The next morning, Claire woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Mara chattering. She dressed quickly in her plainest gown and emerged to find Eli at the stove frying salt pork while his daughter set the table. "Good morning, Miss Evans," he said without turning. "Hope you don't mind an early start. Sun's been up an hour already." "Not at all." Claire moved to help Mara with the plates. "And please call me Claire." Breakfast was a simple affair, salt pork biscuits left from the previous day, and strong black coffee. Eli ate quickly, speaking little, while Mara peppered Claire with questions about Boston trains and whether she knew how to braid hair fancy like the ladies in picture books. After breakfast, Eli took down his coat. "I need to check the mine. The new support beams should have set overnight." "Can I show Claire around?" Mara asked eagerly. "Not today. It's too cold, and there's a storm coming." He turned to Claire. "There's wood stacked by the door. Mara knows how to work the stove if the fire gets low." After he left, Claire spent the morning assessing Mara's education. The girl was bright, but had gaps in her knowledge, strong in practical arithmetic, but weak in reading and writing. By noon, they had established a routine for lessons, and Claire had promised to help Mara write a proper letter to her friend in town. They were working on penmanship when Claire heard voices outside. Moving to the window, she saw Eli speaking with a well-dressed man whose polished boots and tailored coat looked absurdly out of place in the snowy yard. "That's Mr. Reed," Mara said, joining her at the window. "He comes from the big mining company. Pa doesn't like him." Claire studied the stranger with growing unease. There was something familiar about his bearing, the way he gestured as he spoke, something that reminded her uncomfortably of Boston's upper circles. The door opened, and Eli entered, followed by the man. "Claire, this is Harrison Reed representing Silver Summit Mining. Read Miss Claire Evans." Reed removed his hat, revealing silver-streaked dark hair and sharp features. His eyes, calculating and cold, assessed Claire with unconcealed interest. "Miss Evans, a pleasure to meet a fellow Easterner. Boston, I presume, from your accent." Claire felt the blood drain from her face. Though she had never met Harrison Reed in Boston, she recognized his name from the documents she had stolen one of Senator Malloy's business partners in the weapons operation. "Yes," she managed, "though it's been some time since I called it home." Reed smiled, revealing two perfect teeth. "Such a small world. I was just in Boston last month. Perhaps we have mutual acquaintances." Before Claire could respond, Eli cut in. "Reed didn't come to discuss Boston society. He's here with another offer for my claim." Reed's smile never faltered. "Indeed, Mr. Matthews, I've been authorized to increase our offer to $5,000, a very generous sum, for a claim that has yet to produce any significant yield." "The answer's still no," Eli said flatly. "I urge you to reconsider. Silver Summit has acquired most of the neighboring claims. We'll be bringing in machinery expanding operations. It will be difficult for an independent miner to compete." "Is that a threat?" Eli's voice hardened. Reed spread his hands. "Merely an observation of economic reality." His gaze shifted to Claire. "Miss Evans, perhaps you could help Mr. Matthews see reason. A woman of your evident refinement must understand the benefits of progress of civilization." Claire straightened her shoulders, meeting his gaze directly. "Mr. Reed, in my experience, what some call progress often benefits the few at the expense of the many." Something dangerous flashed in Reed's eyes before his smooth mask returned. "How philosophical. Well, I won't intrude further on your day." He replaced his hat, nodding to Eli. "My offer stands until the end of the week. After that, well, the law of supply and demand takes over." After Reed left, Eli remained by the door, his expression thunderous. "Man's been trying to buy me out for months. Price keeps going up, but it doesn't matter. This claim isn't for sale." "Is it because of the mother lode?" Claire asked, before she could stop herself. Eli turned sharply. "Where did you hear about that?" "I saw your map last night on the table." He studied her for a long moment. "That map is private. I'd appreciate if you didn't mention it to anyone, especially Reed or his people." "Of course not. I would never." "Pa," Mara interrupted, pointing out the window. "Mr. Jensen is coming." A weathered man on horseback was approaching the cabin at a gallop, snow flying from his mount's hooves. Eli opened the door as the rider reined to a stop. "Sheriff Jensen," Eli acknowledged. "What brings you out here?" The sheriff, a lean man with a graying mustache and the watchful eyes of a career lawman, dismounted stiffly. "Got news you need to hear, Matthews." His gaze flickered to Claire. "Privately." Eli nodded. "Claire, would you mind checking on the stew? Mara, help her." After they withdrew to the kitchen area, Claire busied herself with the pot, hanging over the fire, but her ears strained to catch the men's low conversation. "Telegram came in this morning," Jensen was saying. "Asked specifically about a woman named Evans just arrived from Boston." "What about her?" Eli's voice sharpened. Sender was a Senator Malloy from Massachusetts. Wanted to know if she'd arrived. Said she was wanted for theft back east. Claire's heart pounded so loudly she was certain they must hear it. "You believe that?" Eli asked. Jensen snorted. "I make it a policy. not to believe anything that comes from politicians. But I thought you should know, especially after seeing Reed leaving here. Those two are connected somehow. Reed works for Silver Summit. And word is Senator Malloy is one of Silver Summit's biggest investors. Just seems like too much coincidence, a Boston woman showing up here just as they're pushing hardest for your claim. Claire's hands trembled as she stirred the stew. They had found her. Somehow, despite her precautions, the Malloys had tracked her to Silver Creek. And now Eli would think she was part of Reed's scheme to acquire his mine. The men's voices dropped further, and Claire could make out only fragments, "Watch your back," and "Governor's office involved." When Jensen left and Eli returned to the kitchen, his eyes were hard as he looked at Claire. "Is there something you want to tell me, Miss Evans?" Claire set down the spoon, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mr. Matthews, Are you working for Reed, for Silver Summit?" His voice was deadly quiet. "Is that why you came here to convince me to sell?" "No, I've never met Reed before today." "Then explain why a United States Senator is asking after you by name." Claire closed her eyes briefly. There was no point in further deception. "Because I stole something from him, or rather from his son. Documents proving they're involved in illegal weapons trading." Eli's expression shifted from suspicion to disbelief. "Weapons trading. Senator Malloy and his son use their shipping company to smuggle arms to both sides of conflicts across the border. They launder the profits through various investments." She took a deep breath. "Including Silver Summit Mining Corporation." Mara, who had been listening wide-eyed, tugged at her father's sleeve. "Pa, what's laundering? Go to your room, Mara," Eli said, his eyes never leaving Claire's face. "But now." After Mara reluctantly disappeared behind her curtain, Eli stepped closer to Claire. "That's quite a story. Why should I believe you?" "Because I have proof." Claire held his gaze steadily. "The documents are sewn into the lining of my valise. I can show you." For a long moment, Eli studied her as if trying to read the truth in her eyes. Finally, he nodded. "Show me." Claire retrieved her valise and carefully cut the stitches in the lining, extracting several folded papers. She handed them to Eli, watching as he scanned the contents, shipping manifests, bank transfers, coded messages between Malloy, his son, and various business partners, including Harrison Reed. "This is why I came west," Claire explained quietly. "Not because of your mine or Silver Summit, but because I needed to escape the Malloys. They wanted these documents back, and they were willing to—" She faltered. "Let's just say they made it clear I had only two choices: return the papers and become Charles Malloy's mistress, or face ruin and imprisonment." Eli looked up from the documents, his expression grave. "These are serious accusations against powerful men." "They're true. My father discovered part of their scheme, that's why they ruined him financially. When he realized how completely he'd been deceived, he took his own life." Claire's voice broke slightly. "I found these papers afterward when I was going through Charles's study. I had intended to turn them over to the authorities, but the Malloys' influence runs too deep in Boston." Eli was silent for a long moment, processing everything she had told him. Finally, he said, "If Reed recognized you today, you're in danger. And so are we by association." "I don't think he recognized me. We never met in Boston. But if Senator Malloy sent that telegram—" Claire shook her head. "I've put you and Mara at risk. I should leave." "And go where?" Eli's voice was surprisingly gentle. "If they're looking for you, the safest place is probably right here." He glanced toward Mara's curtain. "Besides, my daughter would never forgive me if I sent you away now." "You believe me, then?" Eli carefully refolded the documents. "I believe that Reed and Silver Summit have been trying to force me off my claim by any means necessary. I believe that politicians like Malloy rarely have clean hands. He looked directly at her. And I believe that you've been running from something. I saw it in your eyes the moment we met. He handed the papers back to her. Keep these safe. They may be the only leverage we have. We, Claire echoed. You need a place to hide. I need someone to teach Mara and keep an eye on things when I'm at the mine. His expression softened slightly. And it seems we have a common enemy in Silver Summit. Before Claire could respond, Mara peeked out from behind her curtain. Does this mean Claire is staying? Eli sighed. Yes, she's staying. For now. He turned back to Claire. But if you're staying, you need to learn to use that rifle properly. Tomorrow morning, first light. That night, as Claire lay on her cot listening to the wind howl outside, she realized that for the first time since her father's death, she felt something close to safe. Not because the danger had passed, if anything, it had only increased, but because she was no longer facing it alone. She closed her eyes, remembering the determined set of Eli's jaw as he'd said, "We." Perhaps there was more than one kind of frontier promise, not just the one made in letters, but the unspoken one between people who choose to stand together against common threats. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the tracks that led to the Matthews cabin. In the darkness, Claire didn't see the figure watching from the tree line or the telegram that changed hands in town, carrying 3 fateful words back to Boston. Dawn broke over the Wyoming mountains, painting the snow-covered peaks in hues of amber and rose. The air was knife-sharp with cold, as Eli led Claire to a small clearing behind the cabin. His breath formed clouds in the morning light as he handed her the Winchester. "It's loaded," he warned. 5 rounds. Remember what I showed you yesterday about the lever action? Claire nodded, feeling the weight of the rifle in her gloved hands. It was heavier than her father's hunting guns, but the mechanism was similar. She raised it to her shoulder, sighting along the barrel toward the row of tin cans Eli had arranged on a fallen log 50 yards away. "Breathe out when you squeeze the trigger," Eli reminded her. "Don't pull squeeze." Claire exhaled slowly, steadied her aim, and fired. The rifle's report echoed across the valley. One of the middle cans jumped and clattered to the ground. Eli's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Not bad for a Boston lady." "My father believed every woman should know how to defend herself," Claire replied, working the lever to chamber another round. "Though I imagine he was thinking more of street thieves than mining corporations." Her second shot missed, but the third knocked another can flying. By the 5th shot, she had hit 3 of the 5 targets. "You're a natural," Eli said, something like respect in his voice. "Better than most men I've seen first time out." Claire lowered the rifle, a small glow of pride warming her chest. "Thank you. Though I hope I never have to use this skill for anything more serious than cans." Eli's expression darkened. "In Wyoming territory, hope isn't a strategy." He took the rifle, reloading it with practiced efficiency. "Silver Summit has hired gunmen before to intimidate claim holders, and if Malloy's men come looking for you." He didn't finish the thought. As they walked back to the cabin, Claire studied Eli's profile. In the morning light, she could see lines of worry etched around his eyes and mouth, a man carrying too many burdens alone. "Why won't you sell to Silver Summit?" she asked. "Is it really because of the mother lode?" Eli glanced at her sharply, then sighed. "Partly. I've been tracking a vein that gets richer the deeper I go. All the signs point to a major silver deposit, maybe the biggest in the territory." "But it's more than that, isn't it?" He was silent for several paces. "My wife Sarah died of fever 3 years ago, Before she passed, I promised her I'd build something that would last, something for Mara's future. His jaw tightened. This land that mine, they're not just property. They're my word to Sarah. Claire felt a sudden ache in her chest. I understand keeping promises to those we've lost. Eli looked at her, then really looked at her as if seeing past the Boston refinement to something deeper. I believe you do. When they reached the cabin, Mara was already up, attempting to heat coffee on the stove. I made breakfast, she announced proudly, pointing to a plate of unevenly sliced bread. That's wonderful, Mara, Claire said, hanging her coat by the door. But perhaps we should toast it. It would go nicely with the preserves I saw in the pantry. As they ate, Eli outlined the day's plan. I need to shore up the new tunnel. The last blast exposed a promising vein, but the ceiling needs reinforcing. He turned to Claire. Think you can handle Mara's lessons today? Of course. We'll start with reading, then mathematics. Mara made a face. Can't we do something interesting, like drawing or stories? Tell you what, Claire compromised. If you work hard on your lessons this afternoon, I'll teach you how to make paper snowflakes, and perhaps we can write a story together. Eli rose from the table, donning his coat and hat. I should be back before dark. Keep the rifle handy, just in case. At the door, he paused. And Claire, stay away from the windows if anyone approaches. After he left, Claire and Mara settled into their lessons. The girl was bright and eager to please, though easily distracted. By noon, they had made good progress with her reading, and Claire had discovered that Mara had a natural aptitude for mathematics. Your father mentioned you have a friend in town, Claire said as they ate a simple lunch of bread and cheese. What's her name? Jenny Miller. Her ma runs the boarding house. Mara's eyes brightened. Can I invite her to visit? She'd love the paper snowflakes. Perhaps another time. For now, your father thinks it's best if we keep to ourselves. Claire didn't want to frighten the child with talk of danger, but she needed her to understand the importance of caution. After lunch, as promised, Claire taught Mara to fold and cut paper into delicate snowflake patterns. They were hanging their creations from the ceiling beams when a knock at the door startled them both. Claire motioned for Mara to stay quiet, then moved to the rifle mounted on the wall. Heart pounding, she lifted it down and approached the door. Who's there? Mrs. Miller from town, a woman's voice called. Got a package for Mr. Matthews. Claire hesitated. Leave it on the step, please. Can't do that, miss. Need a signature. Sheriff Jensen sent me, said it was important. Claire's grip tightened on the rifle. Sheriff Jensen had seemed trustworthy, but caution was her watchword now. Just a moment. She positioned Mara behind her and opened the door, a crack rifle ready. A stout, gray-haired woman stood on the porch clutching a brown paper package and looking thoroughly put out by the cold. Lord have mercy, girl. I'm freezing out here. You going to let me in, or do I have to grow icicles first? Something about the woman's frank, no-nonsense manner reassured Claire. She lowered the rifle slightly and opened the door wider. I'm sorry for the caution, Mrs. Miller. We've been advised to be careful. Mrs. Miller stomped the snow from her boots as she entered. As well you should be with Silver Summit's men crawling all over town. That's why Sheriff Jensen asked me to bring this instead of the regular courier. She thrust the package into Claire's hands. It's from the land office in Cheyenne. Eli's been waiting on it for weeks. Thank you for delivering it. Claire set the rifle aside and offered the woman coffee. Don't mind if I do. It's a bitter ride back to town. Mrs. Miller removed her gloves, rubbing her reddened hands together. Her sharp eyes took in Claire's appearance, then flicked to Mara. So you're the Boston lady everyone's talking about. Jenny's been pestering me about when Mara can come visit. You're Jenny's mother, Mara exclaimed, bouncing forward. Can she come play? Claire taught me to make paper snowflakes. Not today, child. Town's not safe at the moment. Mrs. Miller accepted the coffee Claire offered, warming her hands on the mug. New men arrived on yesterday's train. Rough types asking questions about Eli and about a woman from Boston. Claire's blood ran cold. What sort of men? The kind that wear city clothes but carry gun calluses on their hands. Mrs. Miller's shrewd gaze met Claire's. They're staying at my boarding house. 3 of them. Leaders named Sullivan. Claire nearly dropped the coffee pot. Thomas Sullivan was Senator Malloy's personal enforcer, a man known for solving problems permanently. I should warn Eli, she murmured. Already done. Jensen sent word to the mine. Mrs. Miller drained her coffee. Now I best get back before I'm missed. Those men paid well for information about the Matthews place. I told them it was 4 miles south of town, not north. She winked. Should keep them busy for a while. After Mrs. Miller left, Claire opened the package. Inside was a thick document bearing the seal of the Wyoming Territorial Land Office. The official letter confirmed Eli Matthews' ownership of his claim under the mining law of 1872, with specific coordinates marked on an attached survey map. But what caught Claire's eye was a handwritten note tucked between the pages. Matthews Silver Summit filed counterclaim. Hearing set before territorial judge next month. Governor's office involved. Watch your back. Jensen. Claire sank into a chair, the implications clear. Silver Summit wasn't just trying to buy Eli's claim. They were attempting to legally seize it. And with Malloy's influence reaching into the territorial government, the odds were stacked against a lone miner. She was still studying the papers when Mara called from the window. "Riders coming!" Claire rushed to the girl's side, peering through the frost-edged glass. 2 men on horseback were approaching from the north, not the direction of town. One was unmistakably Eli, his familiar shape hunched against the cold. The other was a stranger. "Get away from the window," Claire instructed, reaching for the rifle once more. "Go to your room and stay there until I call you." "But it's Pa." "Now, Mara." Claire positioned herself beside the door, rifle ready, as the horses drew up outside. She heard Eli's voice, then a deeper, unfamiliar one. Footsteps on the porch, a knock. "Claire, it's me!" She opened the door, relief flooding through her at the sight of Eli whole and unharmed. Behind him stood a tall, broad-shouldered man with a weathered face and the unmistakable bearing of a lawman. "This is U.S. Marshal James Cooper," Eli said, stepping inside. "He's an old friend from the war. Jim, this is Claire Evans." The marshal removed his hat, revealing close-cropped gray hair. "Ma'am?" His eyes, keen and assessing, took in the rifle in her hands with approval. "Good to see Eli's found someone who understands caution." "Marshal Cooper is here about Silver Summit," Eli explained, hanging up his coat. "And about Senator Malloy." Hope surged in Claire's chest. "You know about their operations. The Treasury Department has been investigating Malloy for months," Cooper confirmed. "Weapons smuggling, money laundering, bribery of territorial officials. But they're careful, and Malloy has friends in high places." "I have documents," Claire said. "Shipping manifests, bank transfers, coded correspondence." "That's why I'm here." Cooper's expression was grave. "Word reached us that Malloy's enforcer Sullivan has been dispatched to retrieve certain papers and the woman who took them. When I heard he was headed to Silver Creek, I contacted Eli." "We served together in the Union Army," Eli explained. "Jim was my commanding officer. When I needed information about Silver Summit's claim-jumping activities last year, he helped. He's one of the few lawmen I trust completely." Claire retrieved the documents from their hiding place and handed them to Cooper, who spent several minutes examining them in silence. "This is exactly what we need," he said finally. "These banking records connect Malloy directly to arms shipments to Mexico. The Treasury Department can move against him now." "Then it's over?" Claire asked, hardly daring to hope. Cooper shook his head. "Not yet. Sullivan's still coming for you, and Silver Summit still wants Eli's claim. These documents are evidence in a federal case now, which means you're a federal witness. I need to get you to Denver, where you can testify before a grand jury." "Leave?" Claire glanced at Eli, whose face had hardened into an unreadable mask. "But what about—" "I can't go to Denver," Eli interrupted. "Not with Silver Summit trying to steal my claim. The hearing is in a month, and if I'm not here to defend it—" Mara emerged from her room, eyes wide with confusion. "Are we going somewhere?" A heavy silence fell over the cabin. Cooper looked from Eli to Claire, then sighed. "The girl complicates things. Sullivan won't hesitate to use her to get what he wants." "Then we stand and fight," Eli said firmly. "This is my land, my claim. I'm not running. Against Sullivan and his men, plus whatever muscle Silver Summit brings in." Cooper shook his head. "That's suicide, Eli." "What if we split up?" Claire suggested. "I could go to Denver with the marshal testify against Malloy. You and Mara would be safer with me gone." "Or they'd just kill you both to get the claim," Cooper countered grimly. "Silver Summit knows the mother lode is under Eli's land. They'll do anything to get it." Eli paced the small confines of the cabin, his face troubled. Finally, he turned to Cooper. "How long would Claire need to be in Denver?" 2 weeks, maybe 3 for the grand jury proceedings. And then she'd be free to return. Malloy would be under indictment, his assets frozen. Eli nodded slowly. 3 weeks. I can hold off Silver Summit that long. But I need something from you, Jim. Name it. Protection for Mara. Take her with you to Denver. She'll be safer there than here." "Pa, no," Mara cried, rushing to her father's side. "I won't leave you." Eli knelt, taking his daughter's small hands in his. "It's just for a little while, Pumpkin, like a vacation. You've always wanted to see a big city, remember? And Claire will be with you." The girl's chin trembled. "But who'll take care of you? I've been taking care of myself since before you were born." He managed to smile, though Claire could see the pain behind it. "Besides, I won't be alone. Mrs. Miller's son Jacob will stay here. He's a good man with a rifle." Mara threw her arms around her father's neck, burying her face against his shoulder. Eli held her tight, his eyes meeting Claire's over the child's head. In that gaze, Claire read both request and resignation, a father doing what was necessary to protect his child, even at great personal cost. "We should leave at first light," Cooper said quietly. "Sullivan's men will be watching the roads to town by now, but I know another way out through the high pass. We can reach the rail line at North Fork, be in Denver by week's end." As night fell, Claire helped Mara pack a small bag for the journey. The child was subdued, her earlier protests giving way to a quiet acceptance that worried Claire more than tears would have. "Will Pa be all right by himself?" Mara asked, as Claire folded a worn nightgown into the bag. "Your father is very capable," Claire assured her, though her own heart was heavy with doubt. "And we won't be gone long." "Promise?" Claire hesitated, remembering too many broken promises in her own life. "I promise we'll do everything possible to come back to him as soon as we can." Later, after Mara had fallen into troubled sleep, Claire found Eli sitting alone by the fire, staring into the flames with a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Thank you," he said without looking up, "for agreeing to go with her." "Did I have a choice?" There was no bitterness in Claire's voice, only a quiet acknowledgement of their shared predicament. There's always a choice. Eli took a sip of his whiskey. You could have gone alone, left us to our fate. Many would have. Claire sat in the chair opposite him. Just as you could have turned me away when you learned who was pursuing me. Why didn't you? He was silent for a long moment. When Sarah died, something in me died with her. The part that connected to people that trusted. His eyes, reflecting the firelight, finally met hers. Mara's been trying to fill that gap ever since, with friends, with Mrs. Miller, with the idea of a new mother. When she brought you here with her letters, I was angry. Felt like she was trying to replace Sarah. No one could replace your wife, Claire said softly. No, but that doesn't mean there isn't room for... He trailed off, then continued in a different direction. When you showed me those documents, when you told me what you'd risk to expose Malloy's corruption, I recognized something. Courage, principle. A faint smile touched his lips. Not qualities I expected in a Boston society lady. Boston society shaped me, but it never defined me. Claire leaned forward. Just as this claim, this mine, they're important to you, but they're not all that you are. Eli's gaze sharpened. This land is my future. Mara's future. Is it worth your life? Her growing up without a father. He set down his glass with a sharp click. That's not fair. None of this is fair. Life rarely is. Claire held his gaze steadily. I watched my father destroy himself for pride, for reputation. Don't make Mara watch you die for a silver mine. Anger flashed in Eli's eyes. This isn't about pride. It's about standing against men like Reed and Malloy, who think their money and power let them take whatever they want. I understand that better than most, Claire replied, her voice remaining calm. But there are different ways to fight. Testifying against Malloy is my way. Perhaps you should consider what yours should be. Eli stood abruptly. I've considered every option for months. This land is legally mine. The silver beneath it is mine by right of discovery. I won't be driven off by threats or legal maneuvering. Even if it costs Mara her father, his expression hardened. This conversation is over. He moved toward his curtained alcove, then paused. We leave at dawn. Make sure Mara's ready. After he disappeared behind the curtain, Claire remained by the fire, watching the flames slowly die to embers. She understood Eli's determination, his refusal to yield to intimidation. It was the same stubborn principle that had driven her to take Malloy's documents, to flee rather than submit. But principle was cold comfort to a child who might lose her only remaining parent. Dawn came too quickly, painting the eastern sky with streaks of pale gold as they prepared to depart. Cooper had brought a sturdy wagon with a canvas cover ostensibly filled with mining supplies, but concealing a space where Claire and Mara could hide if necessary. Eli held his daughter for a long time, whispering something in her ear that made her nod solemnly. When he finally set her down, he turned to Claire. Keep her safe, he said simply. I will. Claire hesitated, then impulsively removed the silver watch from her pocket, her father's watch, the last remnant of her former life. Take this. It's a chronometer precise to the second. My father used it in his courtroom to time testimonies. Eli looked at the watch, then back at her, confusion evident in his face. For luck, she explained, pressing it into his hand. And as a promise that we'll return. His fingers closed around the timepiece, warm against her cold ones. For a moment, something unspoken passed between them, concern, perhaps, or understanding. Then Cooper called from the wagon, and the moment broke. Go, Eli said gruffly. Stay safe. As the wagon pulled away, Claire looked back at the solitary figure standing before the cabin, his face already set in lines of determination. Beside her, Mara pressed her small face to the canvas opening, watching until her father was no more than a speck against the vast Wyoming landscape. He'll be all right, Claire said, trying to convince herself as much as the child. Your father is a strong man, Mara nodded, wiping away tears with the back of her hand. Pa says Matthew's men don't bend even when the wind howls fiercest. The wagon creaked and swayed as Cooper guided it along a narrow trail that wound upward into the mountains, away from the main road to town. The path was barely visible often, no more than a game trail threading between towering pines. Old Trapper's Route, Cooper explained over his shoulder. Few people know about it these days. Should get us to North Fork without being seen. They had been traveling for perhaps 2 hours when Cooper suddenly pulled the horses to a halt, his body tensing. Get down, he hissed. Both of you, under the canvas. Claire pulled Mara close, ducking beneath the heavy tarp that covered the wagon bed. Through a small gap she could see Cooper casually rearranging his coat, making sure his sidearm was accessible. What is it? She whispered. Riders, coming up from the south. Cooper's voice was barely audible. Stay silent, no matter what happens. Minutes stretched like hours, as they waited, Mara's small body trembling against Claire's. Then came the sound of horses approaching, men's voices carrying in the clear mountain air. Marshal Cooper, a smooth voice called. What a surprise, finding you on this forgotten trail. Reed, Cooper responded evenly. Bit off the beaten path for a mining executive, aren't you? Claire's heart hammered in her chest. Harrison Reed was the last person they wanted to encounter. I might say the same about a U.S. Marshal. Territorial business, federal business, not that it concerns Silver Summit. Reed's laugh held no humor. Everything in this territory concerns Silver Summit Marshal. For instance, I'm very concerned about the whereabouts of Miss Claire Evans. She seems to have disappeared from the Matthews cabin, along with his charming daughter. Haven't seen them, Cooper replied, though I did hear Eli Matthews sent them to visit relatives in Denver. Curious. Miss Evans has no relatives, in Denver or elsewhere. Reed's voice hardened. Where are you taking them, Marshal? I'm transporting mining equipment to North Fork, as you can see. A long silence followed. Claire could imagine Reed weighing his options, deciding whether to challenge a federal marshal openly. Search the wagon, Reed finally ordered someone. That would be unwise. Cooper's tone was deadly calm. This is federal property. Interfering with a U.S. Marshal in the performance of his duties is a serious offense, Mr. Reed, even for Silver's Summit. Another tense silence. Claire held her breath, feeling Mara's fingers dig into her arm. Another time, then, Reed said at last. Give my regards to Miss Evans when you see her, and remind her that certain documents belong to Senator Malloy. He's quite eager for their return. Hoofbeats receded as Reed and his men rode away. Cooper waited several minutes before giving the all-clear. That was too close, he muttered, as Claire and Mara emerged from hiding. Reed's no fool. He knows we're heading for North Fork. Will he follow us? Claire asked, scanning the trail behind them. Cooper shook the reins, urging the horses forward at a faster pace. Probably, but he won't move against us directly, not yet. Reed works through proxies, keeps his own hands clean. Like Sullivan, Claire murmured. Exactly. Cooper's expression was grim. And Sullivan won't be far behind. As the wagon climbed higher into the mountains, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Twice she thought she glimpsed movement among the trees, but when she looked directly, nothing was there. Mara had fallen into an exhausted sleep against Claire's shoulder, when Cooper suddenly drew the wagon to a halt again. This time his expression was one of alarm. "Smoke," he said tersely, pointing toward the valley below. Claire followed his gaze. A thin column of dark smoke rose from the direction they had come from the approximate location of Eli's cabin. "Puh," Mara whispered, awakened by the stop. Her small face drained of color as she too saw the smoke. Cooper was already turning the wagon around. "I need to go back." "We'll come with you," Claire began, but Cooper cut her off. "No, I'll move faster alone. You two continue to North Fork. There's a station master there named Hollister. Tell him I sent you. He'll hide you until I return." "But Eli—" "I'll find him." Cooper's eyes softened slightly. "Eli Matthews is the stubbornest man I ever met. It'll take more than Reed's thugs to bring him down." He helped them down from the wagon, handing Claire a small revolver from his belt. "5 shots. Use them if you have to." He pointed up the trail. "North Fork is about 6 miles that way. Follow the ridge, then down through the pass. You'll see the station." Before Claire could protest further, Cooper had swung himself onto one of the wagon horses, cutting it free from the traces. "Stay off the main trails. If I'm not at North Fork by nightfall tomorrow, take the first train to Denver. Ask for Treasury Agent William Parker." With that, he was gone, galloping back down the trail toward the ominous column of smoke. Claire stared after him, the revolver heavy in her hand. Beside her, Mara's face was set in the same stubborn lines as her father's. "We're not going to North Fork, are we?" the girl asked quietly. Claire looked down at the child, then back at the distant smoke. Her mind raced through their options, weighing dangers against possibilities. "No," she said finally. "We're not. We need to find another way down," Claire said, scanning the rugged terrain that separated them from the valley below. "Cooper will be watching the main trail." Mara tugged at her sleeve, pointing to a narrow deer path that snaked down through a stand of pines. "Pa showed me this way once. It goes to the old mine. Old mine before Pa found our claim. Lots of old mines in these mountains." Claire hesitated. Returning to the cabin was dangerous, possibly foolhardy. Cooper was right. She had a responsibility to get Mara to safety, to ensure the documents reached the federal authorities in Denver. But the thought of Eli facing Reed's men alone with his cabin possibly burning overrode her caution. "Show me," she decided. Mara led the way with surprising confidence, navigating the steep path with the sure-footedness of a mountain child. The trail descended sharply, winding between boulders and along precarious ledges that made Claire's heart race. Twice they had to stop and hide as riders passed on the main trail below, men with rifles heading toward North Fork. "Reed's men," Claire whispered. "Looking for us." By midday, they had reached the valley floor about a mile east of Eli's property. Claire kept them within the tree line, moving cautiously from cover to cover. As they drew closer to the cabin, the smell of smoke grew stronger, acrid, and threatening. "Stay low," Claire instructed, pulling Mara down behind a fallen log. From this vantage point, they could see the cabin, or what remained of it. The roof had partially collapsed, its timbers blackened and still smoldering. The red door hung from a single hinge. The corral fence was broken, the horses gone. Of Eli and Cooper, there was no sign. Mara's small body trembled. "Pa," she whispered, her voice breaking. Claire pulled the child close. "We don't know that he was inside," she said firmly. "Your father is smart and strong. He wouldn't have been caught in a simple fire." "Then where is he?" It was the question Claire had been asking herself since they'd first seen the smoke. If Eli had escaped, where would he go? Not to town, where Sullivan's men would be watching. Not along the main trails which Reed's riders were patrolling. The mine, she realized suddenly. He'd go to his claim. It's what they want. He wouldn't abandon it. Mara nodded eagerly. Pa always says our future is in that mountain. Can you lead us there without being seen? The girl's eyes, so like her father's, hardened with determination. Yes, there's a back way through Thunder Canyon. Pa uses it when he thinks claim jumpers are watching the main trail. As they skirted the burned cabin and moved deeper into the wilderness, Claire kept Cooper's revolver ready. The weight of responsibility for Mara's safety pressed heavily on her shoulders. She had promised Eli to protect his daughter, yet here she was leading the child back into danger. Thunder Canyon proved to be a narrow, twisting ravine carved by a swift-flowing creek. The walls rose steep on either side, providing cover from watching eyes. The path, little more than a game trail, followed the water's edge, muddy and treacherous in places. Pa says the old-timers believed this canyon was made by lightning striking the mountain, Mara explained as they picked their way along. That's why they never found much gold here. The thunder scared it deeper into the earth. Despite the circumstances, Claire smiled at the frontier superstition. And what does your father believe? Pa says the real treasure is knowing where to look when everyone else has given up. Mara glanced back, her small face serious. That's why he kept digging when the other miners said his claim was played out. And that's when he found the silver right where it wasn't supposed to be. The canyon gradually widened, opening into a small sheltered valley. Ahead, the mouth of a mine shaft was visible, shored up with heavy timber supports. A rough-hewn cabin smaller than the main house, little more than a shelter, stood nearby. No smoke rose from its chimney, no light showed in its single window. Claire drew Mara behind a large boulder. Wait here while I check if it's safe. But no arguments. If anything happens to me, run back through the canyon and find Marshal Cooper. She pressed the revolver into Mara's hands. Do you know how to use this? The girl nodded solemnly. Pa taught me, but I never shot anything alive. Let's hope you won't have to start today. Claire squeezed her shoulder. I'll be right back. Heart pounding, Claire crept toward the cabin. The door was closed, the single window shuttered. No horses were visible, no fresh tracks marked the snow. She was about to retreat when she noticed something odd, a faint rhythmic sound coming not from the cabin, but from the mine entrance. Metal striking stone. Someone was working in the mine. Claire approached the dark opening cautiously. The sound grew louder, the unmistakable ring of a pickaxe hitting rock, punctuated by the scrape of a shovel. She peered into the gloom, waiting for her eyes to adjust to the darkness. That's close enough. The voice from behind her was cold as the mountain air. Claire froze, then slowly turned to find herself staring down the barrel of a rifle. Behind it stood a lean man with a scarred face and the hard eyes of a killer. Miss Evans, I presume. His Boston accent was incongruous in the wilderness setting. Senator Malloy sends his regards. Sullivan. It had to be. Claire took an instinctive step backward. Where's Eli Matthews? The miner currently digging his own grave, you might say. Sullivan gestured toward the mine with his rifle. Silver Summit has graciously allowed him to continue working his claim under supervision, of course. Seems there's quite a rich vein he's uncovered. If you've hurt him. Now why would we damage such a valuable asset? Matthews knows this mountain better than anyone. Once he leads us to the mother lode, then his usefulness might diminish. Sullivan's smile never reached his eyes. But you, Miss Evans, your usefulness ended the moment you stole the senator's private papers. Claire's mind raced. If Sullivan was here, that meant Reed's men couldn't be far. And somewhere in that mine was Eli, apparently alive, but a prisoner. She needed to buy time. The documents aren't with me, she said. I sent them ahead to Denver with Marshal Cooper. Sullivan's expression didn't change. A convenient claim, but unlikely. Cooper was seen riding back toward the Matthews cabin alone. He stepped closer. "Where's the girl?" Claire's blood ran cold. "What girl?" "Matthews's daughter. Our sources say Cooper was transporting both of you." "She's safe, far from here." Sullivan studied her face, then shrugged. "It doesn't matter. The child isn't my concern." He gestured with the rifle. "The mine, now. Your miner friend will be pleased to see you before the end." With no choice, Claire moved toward the mine entrance, Sullivan close behind. The shaft was supported by sturdy timbers, a set of ore cart rails running along its floor. Lanterns hung at intervals, casting pools of yellow light that barely pushed back the subterranean darkness. The air grew progressively cooler and damper as they moved deeper into the mountain. The sound of pickaxe on stone grew louder, echoing off the rough-hewn walls. They passed several side tunnels, their entrances dark and forbidding, before the main shaft opened into a larger chamber. 2 lanterns illuminated the space. A man in a tailored suit, Harrison Reed, stood observing as another man swung a pickaxe at the far wall. Even from behind, Claire recognized Eli's powerful shoulders, the set of his head. His shirt was torn and stained with sweat and blood, but his movements were strong, determined. "Matthews," Reed was saying, "you're only delaying the inevitable. The mother lode belongs to Silver Summit now. Governor Williams signed the transfer order this morning." Eli's pickaxe struck the rock with savage force. "Governor Williams can go to hell. This claim is mine by right of discovery." "Was yours," Reed corrected smoothly. "The new survey clearly shows the main vein crosses onto Silver Summit property. The law is quite clear on such matters." "The new survey is a damned fraud, and you know it." Reed sighed theatrically. "Such language. Perhaps you'll be more cooperative when you see who's come to visit." Eli turned pickaxe, still gripped in his hands. When he saw Claire, his face went through a rapid series of emotions, shock, relief, then anger. "Claire, what are you—" His eyes darted past her. "Where's Mara?" Before Claire could answer, Sullivan spoke from behind her. "Your daughter wasn't with her, probably with Cooper, heading for Denver." Something flickered in Eli's eyes, hope perhaps quickly masked. He lowered the pickaxe slightly. "Claire, you shouldn't have come back." "Touching reunion," Reed interrupted. "But we have business to conclude. Miss Evans, Senator Malloy, is most anxious for the return of his property." "The documents are evidence of crimes," Claire replied steadily. "Weapons smuggling, money laundering, bribery of territorial officials." Reed waved a dismissive hand. "Allegations without proof are merely slander. The senator is prepared to be generous if his property is returned intact. A new life somewhere far from here for both of you." His gaze shifted between Claire and Eli. "Consider it carefully. The alternative is considerably less pleasant." Claire glanced at Eli, saw the same stubborn resolve she felt. "I think we've both had enough of Senator Malloy's generosity," she said. Reed's expression hardened. "Sullivan, perhaps Miss Evans needs a demonstration of how serious our offer is." Sullivan stepped forward, but before he could reach Claire, a new voice rang out from the tunnel entrance. "That's far enough." Marshal Cooper stood silhouetted against the lantern light, his revolver aimed steadily at Sullivan. Beside him, to Claire's horror, stood Mara, her small face set in determined lines. "Cooper," Reed acknowledged calmly, "this is a private business matter. I suggest you take the child and leave." "Interfering with a federal witness is a federal crime," Cooper replied, "as is kidnapping, assault, and claim jumping. You're done here, Reed." Sullivan's rifle had swung toward Cooper. For a heartbeat, the tableau held Cooper and Sullivan with weapons leveled at each other. Reed watching with calculated interest, Eli tense and ready beside the rock face Claire caught in the middle, and Mara, brave, foolish, Mara standing her ground beside the marshal. Then several things happened at once. Sullivan fired. Cooper dove sideways, pushing Mara to safety as he returned fire. Reed drew a concealed derringer from his coat, and Eli, with a roar of fury, swung the pickaxe in a deadly arc that embedded it deep in the support beam nearest Reed. The timber cracked with a sound like a gunshot. Dust and small rocks showered down as the beam split lengthwise. "Run!" Eli shouted, grabbing Claire's arm. "The whole section's unstable." Reed staggered backward as more debris rained down. Sullivan fired again, the bullet whining off rock inches from Claire's head. Cooper returned fire, catching Sullivan in the shoulder, spinning him around. "Mara!" Claire called, reaching for the girl as they raced past. "Stay with me!" The tunnel seemed to constrict as they fled, the lanterns swinging crazily from the vibrations now running through the mountain. Behind them came the ominous sound of timber giving way of stone, grinding against stone. They had nearly reached the entrance when a deafening crack split the air. The tunnel behind them collapsed in a thundering cascade of rock and timber. Dust billowed outward, engulfing them in a choking cloud as they stumbled into the daylight. "Cooper!" Eli turned back toward the mine, but it was too late. The entrance was completely blocked, a jumbled mass of stone and splintered wood sealing off the tunnel. For a moment, they stood in shocked silence, gasping for breath, covered in rock dust. Then Mara broke away from Claire, running to her father and throwing her arms around his waist. "Pa, you're hurt." Eli knelt, embracing his daughter fiercely. "I'm all right, Pumpkin. Just some scrapes." He looked over her head at Claire. "You were supposed to be on your way to Denver." "I saw the smoke," Claire explained, still trying to catch her breath. "We couldn't leave without knowing if you were safe." "We—" Eli raised an eyebrow, glancing pointedly at his daughter. "I made her bring me," Mara declared. "I told her about the back way through Thunder Canyon." Eli sighed, but Claire could see the pride behind his exasperation. "That was dangerous, Mara. Both of you could have been killed." "Like you almost were," Claire countered. "What happened at the cabin?" Eli's expression darkened. "Reed's men came just after you left. Said they had a territorial court order to seize the claim. When I demanded to see it, they tried to take me by force." His hand touched a bruise darkening his temple. "I managed to get away, but they torched the cabin to smoke me out." "How did they find you here?" "They didn't. I came to the mine to get the rest of my survey maps, proof that the claim is legally mine. They must have followed me." He looked back at the collapsed mine entrance. "Cooper?" Claire shook her head. "I don't know. He and Sullivan were still inside when it came down." A grim silence fell between them, broken only by the occasional settling of rock as the dust cleared. The magnitude of what had just happened, of what they had just escaped, began to sink in. "The documents," Eli said suddenly. "Malloy's papers. Tell me you didn't bring them back here." "No," Claire assured him. "They're hidden, in a place only I know." Relief flickered across his face, followed quickly by concern. "We need to move. If any of Reed's men were outside the mine, they'll be coming for us." "Where can we go?" "The cabins burned, the mines collapsed, and Sullivan's men are watching the roads to town." Eli's eyes took on a determined gleam. "There's one place they won't think to look. But it's not an easy journey." They salvaged what they could from the small cabin by the mine, a canteen, some jerky, a worn blanket, and most importantly, Eli's survey maps rolled and tied with leather cord. Mara found a small rucksack and insisted on carrying the provisions herself. "We'll head west," Eli decided, studying the position of the afternoon sun, "over Widowmaker Ridge and down through Devil's Backbone. There's an old trapper's cabin in the valley beyond. Few people know about it. Will Marshal Cooper be able to find us? Mara asked, her voice small. Eli and Claire exchanged a glance over the child's head. Neither wanted to voice the likelihood that Cooper hadn't survived the cave-in. If anyone could survive that collapse, it's Jim Cooper, Eli said finally. He's the toughest man I ever knew. But for now, we need to worry about ourselves. The journey was grueling. Widowmaker Ridge deserved its name, a narrow spine of rock with precipitous drops on either side, buffeted by crosswinds that threatened to pluck them from the path. Mara went in the middle, often crawling on all fours with Claire behind her and Eli leading the way. By the time they reached the relative shelter of Devil's Backbone, a twisting ravine flanked by eerie stone formations that resembled vertebrae, the sun was setting, painting the western sky in hues of crimson and gold. "We'll have to make camp here," Eli decided, surveying the deepening shadows. "The trapper's cabin is still a few hours' hike, and these paths are too dangerous to navigate in darkness." They found a sheltered hollow between two rock formations. Eli gathered scrub brush and built a small, nearly smokeless fire, while Claire helped Mara arrange the blanket in the most protected corner. "I'm sorry about your home," Claire said quietly as they worked. "All your possessions." Eli shrugged, though Claire could see the loss weighed on him. "Just things. What matters is that Mara is safe." He glanced at his daughter, who was arranging small stones in patterns near the fire. "And that you came back, though it was foolish. Would you have done any differently if our positions were reversed?" A faint smile touched his lips. "Probably not." They ate a meager supper of jerky and the last of the cornbread Mara had packed for the journey to Denver. As night deepened around them, the temperature dropped sharply. Mara, exhausted by the day's events, curled up on the blanket and quickly fell asleep. Claire sat beside Eli at the fire, both of them watching the flames in silence. Finally, she spoke the question that had been troubling her since the mine. "Reed mentioned a transfer order signed by the governor. Is that possible?" Eli's jaw tightened. "Legally, no. The mining law is clear. I discovered the vein, I worked the claim, I filed all the proper papers. But with enough money and influence," he shook his head, "Silver Summit has both. And the mother lode, is it real? Very real." Eli pulled out one of his survey maps, unrolling it in the firelight. "See this formation? It's a fault line running through the mountain. All the major silver strikes in this region have been along similar faults. I've been tracking the vein for months, and it's getting richer wider. All the signs point to a massive deposit right here." He tapped a spot on the map. "Enough silver to make Mara secure for life. To build something lasting." Claire studied his face in the firelight, the determination in his eyes, the set of his jaw. "Is that why you won't sell for Mara's future?" "Partly." He was silent for a moment. "When Sarah was dying, she made me promise that Mara would have choices in life. Real choices, not just the ones society allows women. Education, independence, the freedom to determine her own path." His voice roughened. "Silver Summit would take all that away. They'd take everything." Claire touched his arm gently. "We'll find a way to stop them. The documents may not be enough. Not in time." Eli looked at her directly. Reed wasn't bluffing about the governor's order. If Silver Summit can prove their survey is correct, that the main vein crosses onto their property, they can legally claim the entire deposit under the Apex law. Then we need to prove their survey is wrong. How the mine is collapsed, and I'm wanted for assaulting Silver Summit employees. If I show my face in town, I'll be arrested, or worse." Claire's mind raced, considering options, discarding them just as quickly. Then she remembered something, a detail from her father's courtroom. What if we could get access to the original territorial survey, the one that established the property boundaries before any claims were filed? Eli's expression sharpened. That would be in the land office records in Cheyenne, but why would that help? Because survey markers can be moved, maps can be redrawn, but the original survey notes would show the true boundaries. Claire leaned forward eagerly. My father once presided over a case involving disputed property lines. The surveyor's field notes were the key evidence. They recorded landmarks, distances, bearings, all taken on site. And if Silver Summit's new survey contradicts the original, then we can prove they falsified their claim. For the first time since the mine collapse, hope flickered in Eli's eyes. It might work, but Cheyenne is 4 days' hard ride and we have no horses, no money. We have something better, Claire said. We have the truth, and I know someone who might help us prove it. Who? Emily Reed. Eli's eyebrows shot up. Reed's wife. The man who's trying to steal my claim and who nearly had us killed today. The very same. Claire's expression was determined. Before we left Boston, I did some research on Silver Summit's investors. Emily Reed was on the list, a major shareholder in her own right, inherited from her father's estate. She's not just Harrison's wife, she's his business partner. All the more reason not to trust her. Or all the more reason she might listen. Claire leaned closer. Think about it. If Silver Summit is exposed for fraud for criminal activity, the company's value collapses. Emily stands to lose everything unless she acts to protect her investment. Eli looked skeptical. That's a thin hope to hang our futures on. Sometimes thin hopes are all we have. Claire's hand found his in the darkness. We need allies, Eli. Someone with access and influence. Emily Reed may be our best chance. But he was silent for the long moment, his fingers warm against hers. Then he nodded slowly. All right, but how do we reach her? She'll be in Silver Creek, surrounded by Reed's men. Leave that to me. Claire's expression was resolute. I survived Boston society for 28 years. I know how to arrange a discreet meeting with another woman. As the fire burned down to embers, they settled into an uneasy rest, Claire and Mara sharing the blanket, Eli keeping watch. The night was clear, stars scattered like silver dust across the velvet sky. In the distance, a wolf howled a lonely sound that seemed to echo the uncertainty of their situation. Just before dawn, Claire was awakened by Eli's hand on her shoulder. Someone's coming, he whispered, indicating a faint light moving along the path they had traveled the previous day. They quickly doused the remains of their fire and gathered their meager belongings. Eli positioned himself at the edge of their shelter, Cooper's revolver recovered from Mara held ready. The light grew closer, bobbing slightly, one person moving deliberately but without apparent caution. Then a voice called out, barely audible at first, but growing clearer. Matthews Evans, you out here? Claire's heart leaped. That's Cooper. Could be a trick, Eli warned, but there was hope in his voice. The light rounded a bend in the path, illuminating a familiar figure, dusty, bloodied, but unmistakably Marshal James Cooper. He stumbled slightly as he approached, clearly exhausted. Thank God, he said when he saw them. Been tracking you since the mine collapsed. Eli lowered the revolver, relief evident in his face. Jim, we thought you were buried in there. Cooper grimaced, wincing as he sat on a nearby rock. Nearly was. Found a side tunnel just as the roof came down. Sullivan wasn't so lucky. Dead? Claire asked. Buried under half the mountain. Cooper coughed, dust still thick in his lungs. Reed got out too, had another exit ready, the snake. What about the transfer order? Is it real? Eli demanded. Cooper nodded grimly. Real enough. Governor Williams signed it yesterday morning. Silver Summit's survey shows the mother-lode apex crossing onto their property. By law, that gives them rights to the entire vein wherever it leads. Claire and Eli exchanged glances. "We were just discussing a possible solution," Claire said. "The original territorial survey." "Won't help," Cooper interrupted. "Reed's thought of that. The original survey records were conveniently destroyed in a fire at the land office last month." Silence fell over the group as the implications sank in. Without the original survey to contradict it, Silver Summit's new survey was the legal reality regardless of its accuracy. "Then we're finished," Eli said flatly. "They've won." "Not necessarily." Cooper reached into his coat and withdrew a folded paper grimy with rock dust but intact. "Reed dropped this in the confusion. It's a telegram from Senator Malloy, sent yesterday." Claire took the paper with trembling fingers and read aloud, "Reed, stop. Treasury agents en route. With warrants, stop. Destroy all evidence and conclude Matthews. Matter immediately. Stop. Return. Boston soonest. Stop. Malloy." "Treasury agents," she breathed. "They must have other evidence against Malloy." "Or someone talked," Cooper suggested. "Either way, Reed's on borrowed time. That's why he's pushing so hard to secure the motherlode before federal authorities arrive." Eli's expression hardened with resolve. "How long do we have?" "The telegram was sent yesterday. Even by fast-horse Treasury agents are at least 2 days from Silver Creek." "Too long," Claire murmured. "Reed could have the claim fully secured by then with armed men guarding it. We need to act now." Ara, who had been listening silently, suddenly spoke up. "What about the cave, Pa?" "The one that connects to our mine." Eli's head snapped up. "What cave?" "The one behind the waterfall. You showed it to me last summer, remember? You said the old Indians used it to reach the mountain's heart." Understanding dawned on Eli's face. "The lava tube. I'd forgotten." He turned to Claire and Cooper. "There's an old volcanic tube that runs deep into the mountain. The entrance is hidden behind a waterfall about 2 miles from here. I explored part of it last year. It seemed to be heading in the direction of my claim." "You think it might connect to your mine?" Cooper asked. "I don't know. I never went far enough to find out. But if it does, then we could access the motherlode directly," Claire finished, excitement building in her voice. "Gather our own samples, prove the vein's location once and for all." Eli nodded, his eyes alight with renewed determination. "It's dangerous. Those old lava tubes can be unstable. But it might be our only chance." Cooper winced as he shifted position, revealing a blood-stained bandage around his thigh. "I won't be much help in tight spaces. Got caught by some falling rock during the escape." "You should rest," Claire insisted. "Mara can stay with you while Eli and I explore the cave." "No," Mara protested. "I want to go too. I found the waterfall first. Remember, Pa?" Eli's expression softened as he looked at his daughter. "It's too dangerous, Pumpkin. The cave will be dark, wet, maybe unstable." "I'm not afraid of the dark," Mara insisted, her small chin jutting forward stubbornly. "And I'm smaller than you. I can fit through tight spaces." Claire and Eli exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, Eli sighed. "We'll all go. Cooper can wait at the entrance. If we're not back by nightfall, he'll know something went wrong." As the first light of dawn crept over the eastern mountains, they gathered their remaining supplies and prepared to move out. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger. But for the first time since the mine collapsed, they had a plan, a thin hope, as Claire had called it, but hope nonetheless. What they didn't know was that Harrison Reed had already set his final plan in motion. Even as they made their way toward the hidden waterfall, Reed's men were positioning dynamite charges throughout the remaining accessible portions of Eli's mine, enough explosives to seal the mother lode forever if Reed couldn't have it. And in Silver Creek, a woman in an elegant traveling dress was packing her belongings, preparing for a hasty departure. Emily Reed paused as she placed a small silver frame in her valise. A photograph of a young man in uniform, his resemblance to her unmistakable. Her son, killed in a border skirmish by weapons that her husband's company had supplied to both sides. On her writing desk lay an open telegram from the Treasury Department requesting her testimony against Silver Summit Mining and her husband. Beside it, a train ticket to Denver, departing that evening. Justice, it seemed, was approaching from multiple directions. The only question was whether it would arrive in time. The waterfall cascaded down the rock face like a silver curtain catching the morning light in prismatic flashes. It wasn't large, perhaps 20 feet in height, but the constant flow over centuries had carved a smooth depression in the stone beneath. Water pooled briefly before continuing its journey down the mountainside. "The entrance is behind it," Claire asked skeptically, eyeing the rushing water. Eli nodded. "There's a narrow ledge along the right side. Stay close to the rock face and you'll keep mostly dry." Mara was already moving nimble as a mountain goat finding footholds in the seemingly smooth stone. "This way, I remember." Cooper settled himself on a boulder nearby, his injured leg stretched out before him. "I'll keep watch. If Reed's men come searching, I'll fire 3 shots as warning." "If we're not back by sunset," Eli began. "You will be," Cooper interrupted firmly. "But if not, I'll head to Silver Creek, find the Treasury agents when they arrive." Claire adjusted the small pack containing candles, matches, and the few supplies they had scavenged. The weight of Cooper's revolver was reassuring against her hip. "Ready." Eli's eyes met hers, a silent communication passing between them. Concern, determination, something deeper, neither was ready to name. "Stay close to me. These caves can be treacherous." The passage behind the waterfall was narrow but navigable, the stone slick with spray and moss. Claire pressed herself against the rock face, feeling the vibration of the falling water through the stone. Ahead, Mara moved with surprising confidence, following her father's lead. Once past the curtain of water, the passage opened into a small grotto, dim but visible in the diffused light filtering through the cascade. Ancient pictographs marked the walls, stylized figures of men, animals and symbols Claire didn't recognize. "Shoshone," Eli explained, noting her interest. This was a sacred place to them. They believed it was where the mountain's spirit lived. Beyond the grotto, darkness reigned. Eli lit 2 candles, handing one to Claire and keeping the other. The flickering light revealed a tunnel extending into the mountain, its floor worn smooth by water or time. "The lava tube," Eli said, "formed centuries ago when this whole region was volcanic. It runs deep into the mountain, no one knows how far." "How do we know it connects to your mine?" Claire asked, her voice echoing slightly in the confined space. "We don't. But the direction is right, and these tubes often branch. If we're lucky, one branch might have intersected the silver vein I've been following." With Eli leading, they moved deeper into the mountain. The lava tube maintained a consistent diameter wide enough for them to walk upright, but narrow enough that Claire could touch both walls by extending her arms. The air grew progressively cooler, carrying a mineral scent, rock dust water, and something metallic. They walked for what seemed like hours, the passage occasionally branching. At each junction, Eli studied the rock formations carefully before choosing their path. "What are you looking for?" Claire asked after the third such pause. "Signs of silver," he replied, holding his candle close to the wall. "Discoloration in the rock, certain mineral formations. The mother lode will leave markers. Mara, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly pointed ahead. Pa, look, is that your rope? Hanging from the ceiling where the tunnel bent sharply downward was a frayed length of hemp rope, its end disappearing into darkness below. Eli's face lit with recognition. This is one of my exploration routes from last summer. He examined the rope carefully. It's still secure. We can use it to descend to the lower level. The descent was nerve-wracking. The rope dropped through a vertical shaft some 15 feet deep, opening into another tunnel below. Eli went first, then helped Mara down. Claire followed, trying not to think about the darkness beneath her or what might happen if the aged rope gave way. The lower tunnel was different, clearly not natural. Tool marks scarred the walls, support timbers appeared at intervals, and the remnants of an ore cart track ran along the floor. "We're in an old mining shaft," Eli confirmed, excitement building in his voice. "Probably abandoned decades ago when the initial gold rush played out. But if I'm right about the direction—" He moved ahead rapidly, holding his candle higher. The tunnel began to slope upward, the air growing thicker with dust. Twice they had to climb over cave-ins where the ceiling had partially collapsed. Claire helped Mara navigate these obstacles, impressed by the child's determination and lack of fear. "You're very brave," she told the girl as they scrambled over a pile of fallen rock. Mara shrugged. "Pa says Matthew's women have grit in their veins instead of blood." She glanced back at Claire. "I think you must have some Matthews in you too." The simple statement touched Claire deeply. From anyone else, it might have been mere words, but from Mara, who had lost her mother and sought so desperately for someone to fill that void, it was a profound acceptance. Ahead, Eli had stopped abruptly. "Lord in heaven," he breathed, his voice filled with wonder. "Look at this." Claire and Mara hurried forward to find Eli standing before a wall that seemed to glow in the candlelight. Veins of silver, pure gleaming silver, threaded through the dark stone like frozen lightning, thick as a man's wrist in places. "The mother lode," Eli whispered, reaching out to touch the metallic surface reverently. "Even richer than I imagined." Claire had never seen anything like it. The silver wasn't just embedded in the rock. It seemed to flow through it, a living presence within the mountain's heart. No wonder men killed for this, she thought. It was breathtaking. "Is it ours, Pa?" Mara asked, her small face reflecting the silver's glow. Eli knelt beside his daughter. "It's on our claim pumpkin. At least it should be, if the boundaries were marked honestly." He turned to Claire. "This is well south of the dividing line between my claim and Silver Summit's property, at least according to the original survey markers." "Then this proves Reed's survey is fraudulent," Claire said. "But how do we document it? We need evidence that will stand up in court." Eli thought for a moment, then began searching through his pockets. He produced a small notebook and pencil, then a compact surveyor's compass. "We map it. I'll take bearings from markers I recognize, record the vein's direction and position. With these measurements, a territorial judge could determine the true boundaries." As Eli worked, making careful notes and measurements, Claire explored the chamber further. The silver vein continued along the wall for at least 30 feet before disappearing into solid rock. Near its terminus, she noticed something odd, a rectangular depression cut into the stone floor. "Eli," she called. "What's this?" He joined her, holding his candle low to illuminate the feature. "Blasting position. Someone was preparing to set charges here." His expression darkened. "Recently, by the look of it, the drill marks are still sharp, not weathered. Reed's men." "Must be. They were planning to blast through this wall, following the vein." He examined the rock face carefully. "And they were right to. The mother lode continues beyond this point, probably gets even richer. A muffled sound reached them, distant but unmistakable. Voices. Men's voices coming from somewhere ahead. Eli extinguished his candle, immediately motioning for Claire to do the same. In the sudden darkness, the voices became clearer. "All charges set, Mr. Reed. Just give the word." "Excellent. Once Matthews is dealt with, we'll blast through from our side. The governor's men arrive tomorrow to formally transfer the claim. By then, I want full access to the motherlode established." Harrison Reed. He and his men must be in an adjacent tunnel separated from them by only a thin wall of rock. "What about the woman and the child?" another voice asked. "Sheriff Jensen is searching for them. When found, they'll be escorted out of the territory, by force, if necessary." "And Matthews," a pause, then Reed's voice, cold as the stone around them. "Mr. Matthews has become a liability. When he's located, make it look like an accident. Mining is such a dangerous profession after all." Claire felt Eli tense beside her in the darkness. His hand found hers, squeezing once a warning to remain silent. The voices began to fade as Reed and his men moved away. When they could no longer be heard, Eli relit his candle, his face grim in the flickering light. "They're going to blow the connecting tunnels," he said quietly. "Seal off access from my claim permanently while they work the vein from their side." "Can they do that legally?" Claire whispered. "With the governor's transfer order, yes. Once the claim is officially Silver Summit's property, they can do whatever they want with it." He glanced at the silver vein, then back at Claire and Mara. "We need to get out of here, now. If they're setting charges—" They didn't need further prompting. Gathering their meager supplies, they began the journey back through the tunnels, moving as quickly as caution allowed. The return seemed both faster and more harrowing. Each creak of timber, each distant sound, magnified by the knowledge that Reed's men were somewhere in the mountain preparing destruction. They had nearly reached the vertical shaft with the rope when a deep rumble shook the tunnel. Dust sifted down from the ceiling. Loose rocks clattered to the floor. "They've started," Eli said, urgency in his voice. "The blasting could destabilize this whole section. Hurry." He helped Mara up the rope first, then Claire. As Claire neared the top, another stronger tremor shook the mountain. Below her, she heard Eli curse as a support timber cracked. "Eli," she called down. "Keep going," he shouted back. "Get Mara out." Claire reached the upper tunnel and pulled Mara away from the shaft opening. Another explosion rumbled through the mountain, closer this time. The floor beneath them shuddered. "Pa!" Mara cried, trying to peer down the shaft. A hand appeared at the edge, then Eli hauled himself up, breathing hard. His face was streaked with dust, a fresh cut bleeding above his eye. "Run!" he gasped. "The whole thing's coming down." They fled through the upper tunnel as the mountain seemed to convulse around them. Timbers groaned, rocks fell from the ceiling. The path that had seemed straightforward on their inward journey now twisted confusingly in their haste to escape. "This way!" Eli shouted over the noise, pulling them down a side passage as the main tunnel behind them collapsed in a thunderous cascade of rock. The new passage narrowed alarmingly, forcing them to crawl in places. Claire kept Mara close, shielding the child with her body when debris rained down. Ahead, Eli forged on his determination, never wavering, despite the increasing signs that the entire cave system was becoming unstable. Just when Claire feared they were hopelessly lost, a different quality of light appeared ahead, the diffuse, natural illumination of day, rather than the pinpoint glow of their remaining candle. The roar of the waterfall reached them, growing louder with each step. "We're almost there," Eli called back. "The grotto is just ahead." They stumbled into the small chamber with its ancient pictographs, now illuminated by daylight filtering through the waterfall. The air was fresher, cooler, carrying the scent of pine and open spaces. But as they approached the final passage leading behind the waterfall, Eli stopped abruptly, throwing out an arm to halt Claire and Mara. "What is it?" Claire whispered. Eli pointed silently toward the waterfall. Through the curtain of cascading water, dark silhouettes were visible, men with rifles positioned on the rocks outside. "Reed's men," Eli breathed. "They've found our exit." Claire's heart sank. After all they'd endured, to be trapped now so close to freedom seemed cruelly unfair. "Is there another way out?" Eli shook his head grimly. "Not that I know of. These old lava tubes can run for miles, but with the blasting destabilizing everything." Another explosion deeper in the mountain emphasized his point. The grotto floor trembled beneath their feet. "What about Cooper?" Mara asked. "He was supposed to warn us." Eli's expression darkened. "Let's hope they haven't found him." They retreated deeper into the grotto, seeking shelter behind a large boulder as they considered their options. Outside, Reed's men appeared to be settling in for a wait, confident their quarry would eventually emerge. "Could we slip past them in darkness?" Claire suggested. "Wait until nightfall." "Maybe, but the mountain might not give us that long." Eli glanced up at the ceiling, where fine dust continuously sifted down with each distant rumble. "Those charges they're setting are major. They're not just trying to access the vein, they're trying to seal it off from anyone else." "Seal us off too," Mara whispered. Claire put an arm around the child's shoulders, drawing her close. Despite the dire situation, she felt an odd sense of clarity. These past days with Eli and Mara had shown her a kind of courage she hadn't known she possessed. Not the brittle social bravery of Boston drawing rooms, but something deeper, more elemental. "We need a distraction," she said, her mind racing through possibilities. "Something to draw them away from the entrance long enough for us to slip past." Eli was examining their surroundings with a miner's practiced eye. There might be a way. He pointed to a narrow fissure in the grotto wall, partially hidden behind a stone outcropping. "Air is moving through there. It must connect to the surface somewhere." "Too small for us," Claire observed, "but not for noise to travel." Eli dug in his pocket and produced a small metal container, a blasting cap tin. Inside were 3 percussion caps used for setting off dynamite charges. "If I can wedge these into that fissure and set them off, the sound will travel up to the surface. Might make Reed's men think we're trying to blast another exit." "Would that work?" Claire asked doubtfully. "It might. Percussion caps make a sharp crack like a gunshot. If they think we're shooting or blasting our way out elsewhere, they might split their forces to investigate." It was a desperate plan, but they had few alternatives. As Eli prepared the percussion caps, Claire formulated the next part of their strategy. "If they do divide their forces, I'll go first with Mara," she decided. "You follow and cover our retreat." Eli looked up, protest forming on his lips. "I'm faster with Mara," Claire continued before he could object. "And you're better with that revolver than I am. It makes tactical sense." After a moment, Eli nodded reluctantly. "Head west, once you're clear." Cooper was positioned on the eastern slope. If he's still free, that's where he'll be watching from. He'll cover you. "And you'll be right behind us," Claire said firmly. It wasn't a question, but a command. Eli's eyes met hers, something unspoken passing between them. "Right behind you," he affirmed. He wedged the percussion caps deep into the fissure, then attached a slow-burning fuse, a strip of cloth soaked in oil from his lamp. "This should give us about 2 minutes before it ignites the caps." Once the fuse was lit, they moved to the entrance of the passage leading behind the waterfall. Through the liquid curtain, they could make out 3 men, armed guards positioned to catch anyone emerging from the cave. The wait seemed interminable. Claire held Mara's hand tightly, feeling the child's pulse racing through her small fingers. Eli crouched beside them, Cooper's revolver ready, his eyes never leaving the guards outside. When the percussion caps finally detonated, the sound was like a whip crack magnified 100-fold. It echoed through the grotto and presumably up the fissure to the surface. The effect on the guards was immediate. They turned toward the sound, conferring urgently. After a moment, 2 of them headed off, leaving a single guard at the waterfall entrance. "Now," Eli whispered. "I'll handle the guard. Once he's down, run for the trees, and don't stop." Claire hesitated, a sudden fear gripping her heart. "Eli, go," he urged. "I'll be right behind you." Before she could respond, he was moving, slipping silently through the passage toward the waterfall. Claire and Mara followed at a distance, watching as Eli reached the edge of the cascade. The remaining guard stood with his back to the fall's rifle-ready eyes scanning the surrounding forest. He never saw the figure emerging from behind the water. Eli struck with swift precision, using the butt of Cooper's revolver to render the man unconscious with a single blow. "Clear," he called softly, dragging the guard's body aside. Claire and Mara rushed forward, emerging from the cave into the blinding daylight. After hours in the dimness of the tunnels, the sun seemed impossibly bright. Claire blinked, momentarily disoriented. "The trees," Eli reminded her, pointing to a dense stand of pines about 50 yards away. "Go!" Clutching Mara's hand, Claire ran. The ground was rough, strewn with rocks and fallen branches, but fear lent her speed. Behind them, Eli followed, constantly looking back to ensure they weren't being pursued. They had covered perhaps half the distance to the tree line when a shout rang out. One of the guards had returned, spotting their escape. A rifle shot cracked the bullet, whining off a rock near Claire's feet. "Keep going!" Eli yelled, turning to return fire. Claire didn't look back. She focused solely on reaching the trees, on getting Mara to safety. The child ran beside her with desperate speed, her small legs somehow keeping pace. More shots rang out behind them. A cry of pain, not Eli's voice, Claire noted with relief. He must have hit one of their pursuers. Then they were among the trees, the thick pines offering welcome cover. "Don't stop," Claire gasped, pulling Mara deeper into the forest. "We need more distance." They ran until Mara stumbled, her endurance finally failing. Claire scooped her up without breaking stride, the child's weight barely registering through the haze of fear and determination. When they finally paused to catch their breath, sheltered in a small hollow beneath a fallen tree, Claire realized with a surge of dread that Eli was no longer behind them. "Pa?" Mara called softly, looking back the way they had come. No answer came but the sighing of wind through the pines. "He was right behind us," Claire whispered, straining to see through the trees. "He must have stopped to hold them off." The realization brought a cold weight to her chest. Eli had sacrificed himself to ensure their escape. The man who had initially been so reluctant to help her, who had seemed so focused on his silver claim, had put their lives above his own. "We have to go back," Mara insisted, struggling to rise. "Pa needs us." Claire held the child firmly. "No, Mara. Your father wanted us to get to safety. That's how we help him best." She tried to keep her voice steady, though her own heart screamed to return. "We need to find Marshal Cooper. He'll know what to do." Distant shouts reached them, Reed's men searching the forest. They were spreading out methodically, covering ground, moving in their direction. "Come," Claire whispered, helping Mara to her feet. "We need to keep moving west." They traveled as quietly as possible, using every bit of cover the forest provided. Claire kept them to the rockiest ground, hoping to leave minimal tracks. Mara, despite her fear for her father, moved with the natural stealth of a child raised in wilderness. The sun was beginning its westward descent when they heard a soft whistle, 3 notes a pattern that seemed deliberate. It came again from their left. "That's Cooper's signal," Mara whispered. "Pa taught it to me." Hope surged through Claire. She returned the whistle hesitantly, watching the trees ahead. A figure emerged from behind a massive pine, Marshal Cooper, his face drawn with pain and exhaustion, but his eyes alert. He motioned them forward urgently. "Thank God," he breathed when they reached him. "When I heard the shooting," he looked past them. "Where's Eli?" Claire's throat tightened. "He stayed behind, to cover our escape." Cooper's expression hardened. "Reed's men, at least 3 that we saw. They were waiting at the cave entrance." "There are more," Cooper confirmed grimly. "A dozen at least, spread through these woods. They found me at my lookout position. I barely got away." He indicated his injured leg, now crudely rebandaged. "Been leading them in circles since." "What do we do now?" Claire asked, glancing worriedly at Mara, whose small face was set in lines of determined courage, despite her evident exhaustion. Cooper considered for a moment. "Silver Creek is closest, but that's where Reed will expect us to go. North Fork is farther but safer. We might find help there." "What about Pa?" Mara's voice was small but insistent. Cooper knelt to her level, wincing at the movement. "Your father is the most capable man I know in these mountains. If anyone can evade Reed's men, it's him." He looked up at Claire, his eyes conveying what he wouldn't say in front of the child, that Eli's chances were slim against such odds. As they prepared to move on, a new sound reached them, not the distant shouts of Reed's men, but a deeper, more ominous rumble. The ground beneath them trembled slightly. "Another blast," Claire wondered. Cooper shook his head. "Bigger than that, almost like—" He never finished the sentence. The rumble intensified rapidly, becoming a roar that seemed to come from the mountain itself. Birds erupted from the trees, their panicked flight adding to the chaos. "Avalanche!" Cooper shouted, grabbing Mara and pulling her toward a massive boulder. "Get to high ground!" Claire scrambled after them, heart pounding as the roar became deafening. Through the trees, she caught a terrifying glimpse of the mountainside in motion, tons of rock earth and trees sliding inexorably downward. They reached the boulder just as the leading edge of the avalanche tore through the forest below them. The ground shook violently. Trees snapped like twigs. The air filled with dust and the sound of destruction. When it finally subsided, leaving an eerie quiet in its wake, they peered cautiously from their shelter. Where there had been forest, there was now a swath of devastation, a river of rubble stretching from high on the mountain down to the valley below. The waterfall was gone. The entire rock face that had housed it collapsed. "The cave," Claire whispered, horror dawning as she realized the implications. "The blasting must have triggered it." "The whole system could have come down," Cooper agreed grimly. "If Eli was still inside—" He didn't need to finish. The magnitude of the destruction was evident. No one could have survived in those tunnels when the mountain collapsed. Mara's small face crumpled. "Pa," she whispered, the single syllable containing a world of grief. Claire gathered the child into her arms, her own tears flowing freely now. Eli Matthews, with his stubbornness and integrity, his devotion to his daughter, and his mine, his unexpected kindness toward a desperate stranger gone. "I'm sorry, little one," Cooper said softly. "Your father was a good man. The best." Claire felt something hard press against her hip As she held Mara the silver watch she had returned to her pocket after Eli had given it back before entering the cave. "Keep it safe," he had said. "It's your father's legacy, not mine." A legacy. What legacy remained for Mara now? The mine was destroyed. The cabin burned her father. "We should move," Cooper said gently. "Reed's men will regroup once they realize what's happened. We need to reach North Fork before dark." Claire nodded, though the thought of continuing seemed almost impossible under the weight of their loss. She helped Mara to her feet, keeping an arm around the child's shoulders. "We'll make it," she promised, not knowing how she would keep such a vow, but determined to try. "For your father's sake." They had taken only a few steps when Mara suddenly stiffened, then broke free from Claire's grasp. "Look!" she cried, pointing toward the edge of the avalanche field. There, Claire squinted against the setting sun. At first she saw nothing but devastation, broken trees, tumbled rocks, the remnants of what had once been forest. Then, movement caught her eye. A figure, limping but upright, picking its way through the debris. "Pa!" Mara screamed, her voice carrying across the destroyed landscape. "P.A.!" The figure stopped, turned. Even at this distance, there was no mistaking Eli Matthews' broad shoulders, his distinctive stance. He waved once, then began moving toward them with renewed energy. "I'll be damned," Cooper breathed. "The man has more lives than a mountain cat." Mara was already running, heedless of danger, scrambling down toward her father. Claire followed, heart pounding with a mixture of disbelief and joy, so intense it bordered on pain. Eli met them halfway, catching Mara as she launched herself into his arms. His clothes were torn and dust-covered, his face lacerated by flying debris. But his eyes, those deep blue eyes, were bright with life, and something Claire had never seen in them before, unbridled joy. "You're alive," Claire gasped when she reached them. "How the cave wasn't in it," Eli replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Got pinned down by Reed's men after you escaped. Was trying to circle around when the mountain came down." He looked back at the devastation. Never seen anything like it. The whole face just collapsed. "Reed?" Cooper asked, making his way carefully down to join them. Eli's expression darkened. "Caught in it, along with most of his men. They were closer to the blast zone than I was." A moment of silence fell as they absorbed the implications. Harrison Reed, with his ambitions and schemes buried beneath the very mountain whose riches he had coveted. "The mine?" Cooper finally asked. Eli gazed up at the altered mountainside. "Gone. The mother lode with it. Buried so deep now that no one will reach it in our lifetime." Claire expected to see regret in his face, the loss of the silver deposit. He had worked so hard to discover the future he had planned for Mara. Instead, she saw only relief and gratitude as he held his daughter close. "Doesn't matter," he said softly. "Some treasures are worth more than silver." As the sun set behind the western peaks, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, they made their way slowly down the mountain. The dangers weren't over. Reed's surviving men might still be searching, and the journey to North Fork would be arduous, especially for Cooper with his injured leg and Eli with his new wounds. But for the first time since Claire had arrived in Wyoming territory, she felt something like peace. Not because their troubles were resolved, far from it, but because in this moment, with Mara's small hand in hers and Eli walking beside them, she knew with absolute certainty that she had found where she belonged. The silver watch rested in her pocket, a link to her past. But her future lay here in this wild, beautiful, dangerous land, with these people who had become more precious to her than all the silver in Wyoming. What she didn't know, what none of them yet realized, was that the mountain's collapse had exposed something else entirely. High on the western slope, where the avalanche had torn away centuries of accumulated soil and vegetation, a gleam of yellow now caught the setting sun's rays. Gold. Not silver, but gold, a massive deposit, possibly larger than any previously discovered in the territory. And it lay directly on what remained of Eli Matthews' legal claim. Fortune, it seemed, had not abandoned them after all. It had merely been waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The journey to North Fork took 2 days. They traveled cautiously, avoiding the main trails, ever watchful for Reed's remaining men. Cooper's leg wound had worsened, forcing frequent stops. Eli, though he wouldn't admit it, was clearly suffering from his own injuries, a deep gash across his ribs, bruised or possibly broken ribs, and a persistent limp. Only Mara seemed to gain strength, with each mile her resilience astonishing after all they had endured. She ranged ahead as Scout found water when their canteen ran dry and spotted the game trail that ultimately led them to the small settlement. North Fork proved to be little more than a way station for the railroad, a water tower, a telegraph office, and a handful of buildings clustered around the tracks. But to the weary travelers it appeared as welcoming as a governor's mansion. "First telegram office I've seen in days that isn't controlled by Silver's Summit," Cooper remarked as they approached. "Time to alert the Treasury Department that their suspect is buried under half a mountain." They made an odd procession entering the settlement. Cooper hobbling on a makeshift crutch, Eli supporting him on one side, Claire on the other, and Mara running ahead to announce their arrival. The station master, a grizzled man named Hollister, took one look at their battered condition and ushered them into his private quarters behind the telegraph office. "You folks look like you tangled with a grizzly and lost," he observed, setting a pot of coffee on his small stove. "Marshal Cooper, you're a damn sight worse for wear than when I saw you last." "Appreciate the hospitality, Hollister," Cooper replied, easing himself onto a bench with a barely suppressed groan. "We need to send some urgent wires." While Cooper composed messages to the Treasury Department and the territorial governor, Claire, tended to Eli's wounds as best she could with the limited supplies Hollister provided. Mara had fallen asleep almost immediately, curled on a pallet in the corner, exhaustion finally claiming her. "That needs stitching," Claire said quietly, examining the gash on Eli's side, "and your ribs need binding." "I've had worse," he replied, though his sharp intake of breath when she cleaned the wound belied his stoicism. "That's not particularly reassuring." She worked methodically, her hands steady despite her fatigue. "You nearly died out there." Eli caught her wrist, gently stilling her movements. "But I didn't. None of us did." His eyes, intense, despite the pain clouding them, held hers. "Thanks to you." "You could have kept running," he interrupted. "Taken Mara to Denver, testified against Malloy, started a new life. Instead, you came back, for a man who wasn't exactly welcoming when you arrived." Claire felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I couldn't leave you to face Reed alone." "Why not?" The question was simple, direct, quintessentially Eli. She hesitated suddenly, unsure how to articulate the emotions that had driven her decision. Because you and Mara became important to me, more important than I expected, than I intended." A small smile touched Eli's lips. "Seems we have that in common." Before Claire could respond, Cooper approached, leaning heavily on his crutch. "Wires sent. Treasury agents should be in Silver Creek by tomorrow. They'll want statements from all of us." "What about Malloy?" Claire asked. "And Silver's Summit?" Treasury Department already had most of what they needed from other sources. Your documents were the final piece. Cooper eased himself onto a chair. "Malloy's been arrested in Boston. His assets, including Silver Summit Mining, have been frozen pending investigation. Relief washed over Claire. The man who had driven her father to suicide, who had pursued her across the country, would face justice at last. "And Reed?" Eli asked. "Officially missing, presumed dead in a mining accident. His widow, Emily Reed, has apparently been cooperating with authorities, turned over company records that implicate both her husband and Malloy in the weapons smuggling operation." Claire recalled her earlier intuition about Emily Reed. "She lost someone to those weapons, didn't she?" Cooper nodded. "Her son, Army officer killed in a border skirmish 2 years ago, shot with a rifle that Silver Summit had supplied to both sides of the conflict." He shook his head grimly. "Seems she's been gathering evidence against her husband for months, waiting for the right moment to act." A whistle sounded in the distance, a train approaching. Hollister glanced at the clock on his wall. "That'll be the eastbound to Denver. Runs through to Chicago if you're heading that way." The question hung unspoken in the air. What now? With Reed dead, Malloy arrested, and the mother lode buried beneath tons of mountain, what future awaited them, Cooper was the first to speak. "I need to report to my superiors in Denver. The Treasury Department will want those documents, Claire." "Of course," she agreed. The papers that had once been her only leverage, her protection, were now simply evidence in a federal case. Their importance to her personally had diminished with each passing day in Wyoming, each day spent with Eli and Mara. "And after that," Cooper asked gently, "back to Boston." Claire glanced at Eli, whose face had assumed the carefully neutral expression she had come to recognize when he was guarding his thoughts. I don't know." The silence that followed was broken only by the approaching train, its rhythm a counterpoint to the uncertainty that filled the small room. Finally, Eli spoke. "The cabin's gone. The mine's gone. But the land is still mine, by right. Good land with water and timber." He met Claire's gaze steadily. "It would take work to rebuild, a lot of work." "You're staying then?" Cooper asked. "Even with the silver lost?" Eli nodded slowly. "Wyoming's my home, Mara's home, has been since Sarah died." He glanced at his sleeping daughter. "I made a promise to build something lasting. Silver or no silver, that promise still stands." Claire felt something tighten in her chest, a mixture of admiration and something deeper, something she wasn't yet ready to name. This man who had lost nearly everything was still thinking of promises kept of building a future from the ashes of disaster. "What about you, Claire?" Cooper's question was gentle but direct. "You've got a life waiting back east. Family connections, society." "I have nothing waiting in Boston," she replied firmly. "My father is gone. Our home, our position in society, all lost when Charles Malloy ruined us." She twisted the silver watch between her fingers, a habit she had developed in moments of decision. "The only thing Boston holds for me now is painful memories." Eli watched her, his expression guarded, but his eyes intent. "And Wyoming, what does it hold for you?" The train whistle blew again, closer now. Time for decisions. Claire looked from Eli to the sleeping Mara, then back again. "Possibilities," she said simply. "If I'm welcome to stay." Something shifted in Eli's eyes, a lightening, a spark. "More than welcome." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken emotions. Then Cooper cleared his throat. "Well, I still need those documents, and my leg won't heal properly without a real doctor. I'll be on that train to Denver." He gave Claire a knowing look. "Unless you need an escort back east." Claire shook her head. "No, I think I'm where I need to be." The next morning dawned clear and crisp, the September air carrying the first hint of autumn. Cooper departed on the eastbound train, the precious documents secure in his inside pocket. His promise to return, once his leg healed, met with skepticism from Eli. "Marshals always say they'll be back," Eli remarked as they watched the train pull away. "Then some new case takes them elsewhere." "He'll return," Claire said confidently. "If only to check on Mara." They made arrangements to return to Silver Creek, where the territorial authorities would want their statements about Reed and the collapse of the mine. Hollister provided them with supplies and the loan of a mule-drawn wagon for the journey. As they prepared to depart, a rider approached from the east, a young man in the distinctive uniform of a Wells Fargo agent. He reined in beside the station, dismounting with the practiced ease of one who spent more hours in the saddle than out of it. "Telegraph for Matthews," he announced, handing a yellow envelope to Hollister. "Urgent from Silver Creek." Eli accepted the telegram with a puzzled frown. Few people knew they were in North Fork. He tore it open, scanned the brief message, then let out a low whistle of surprise. "What is it?" Claire asked, concerned by his expression. Eli handed her the telegram. It read, "Matthews Stop Avalanche, Exposed Gold Deposit, West Slope. Your claim. Stop, significant findings confirmed. Stop return, soonest. Stop. Jensen." "Gold," Claire whispered, scarcely believing the words before her. "Not silver, but gold." Eli seemed equally stunned. "The West Slope was barren, at least we thought it was. All our exploration focused on the eastern tunnels following the silver vein. Could it be true? After everything?" "Sheriff Jensen wouldn't send this if he wasn't certain." Eli's face reflected bewilderment, then dawning hope. "The avalanche must have stripped away the topsoil, exposed what was hidden beneath." Mara, who had been listening wide-eyed, tugged at her father's sleeve. "Does this mean we're rich, Pa?" Eli knelt to her level, his expression serious. "It means we might have a new beginning, Pumpkin. A chance to rebuild. But rich." He glanced up at Claire, something warm in his gaze. "I think we already are in the ways that matter most." The journey back to Silver Creek took on a dreamlike quality for Claire. After days of fear and flight, of danger and loss, the possibility of such a dramatic reversal of fortune seemed almost too incredible to accept. Yet, with each mile, the future appeared to reshape itself before her eyes, no longer a desperate struggle to survive, but a chance to truly live. They arrived in Silver Creek, to find the town transformed. News of the gold discovery had spread like wildfire. The street bustled with activity, miners, merchants, speculators, all drawn by the prospect of a new strike. Silver Creek, it seemed, was on the verge of becoming a boom town. Sheriff Jensen met them at the edge of town, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile at their approach. "Matthews, Miss Evans, wasn't sure my telegram reached you." "It did," Eli confirmed, helping Claire down from the wagon. "Is it true? About the gold?" Jensen nodded vigorously. "Richest deposit I've seen in 30 years of law enforcement. And it's smack in the middle of your claim, what's left of it after the avalanche." He handed Eli a small leather pouch. "A sayer confirmed it yesterday. 24-carat pure as a maiden's heart." Eli opened the pouch, pouring several small nuggets into his palm. They gleamed in the sunlight, their golden hue so different from the silver he had pursued for so long. "The Treasury agents arrived this morning," Jensen continued. "They're waiting to take your statements about Reed and Malloy. Governor's representative, too. Seems you folks stirred up quite a hornet's nest." "Will there be trouble about the claim?" Claire asked the lawyer's daughter, in her immediately concerned with legalities. "With Reed dead and Silver Summit's assets frozen, Jensen shook his head. Your claim is solid, Matthews. Treasury Department made sure of that. With Malloy under indictment and Reed presumed dead, Silver Summit's challenge is null and void. The gold is legally yours. As they made their way through town toward the sheriff's office, Claire was struck by how differently people regarded them now. The same townspeople who had once viewed her with suspicion, who had whispered mail-order bride behind her back, now nodded respectfully. Whether it was news of their ordeal on the mountain or simply the magic word gold, attitudes had shifted dramatically. The meetings with federal officials consumed the remainder of the day. Claire provided her account of Malloy's operation, Reed's pursuit, and the events leading to the mine's collapse. Ely detailed Silver Summit's attempts to seize his claim through fraud and intimidation. Even Mara contributed her clear-eyed recollections of Reed's men burning their cabin, drawing sympathetic murmurs from the assembled officials. By evening, they were exhausted, but officially cleared of any wrongdoing. The Treasury agents departed for Denver with their statements promising that Malloy would face the full force of federal prosecution. What now? Claire asked as they sat on the hotel porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in hues of gold that seemed particularly appropriate given the day's revelations. Ely gazed toward the mountain, its profile altered by the avalanche but still dominating the landscape. We rebuild. The cabin first winter's coming and we'll need shelter. We, Claire echoed a question in the single word. Ely turned to her, his expression more open than she had ever seen it. I'm not much for fancy words or grand gestures, Claire. Boston men probably court with poetry and flowers. He shook his head ruefully. All I have to offer is hard work, a gold claim that might make us comfortable but never rich by Eastern standards, and a life that will never be easy. But it would be honest, and it would be ours. Claire felt her heart quicken. Are you asking me to stay permanently? I'm asking for more than that. Ely reached for her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. I'm asking if you could see a future here, with me, with Mara. He paused, vulnerability evident in his face. As a family. The word hung between them, weighted with meaning. Family. Something Claire had lost with her father's death, something she had never expected to find again, least of all in the Wyoming wilderness, with a silver miner and his precocious daughter. Mara needs a mother, Ely continued when Claire didn't immediately respond. But that's not why I'm asking. I'm asking because these past weeks have shown me what kind of woman you are. Brave, principled, willing to fight for what matters. His voice softened. And because I find myself thinking of you first when I wake, and last before I sleep. Claire felt tears prick her eyes. Not sad tears, but the kind that come when joy fills a heart too long accustomed to sorrow. I never expected this, she admitted. When I fled Boston, I was only thinking of escape, of survival. And now? She looked out at the town, at the mountain beyond, then back to the man beside her, this stubborn, honorable man who had lost so much, yet remained unbroken. Now I'm thinking of building something lasting. Eli's smile was slow, transforming his face. Is that a yes? Instead of answering directly, Claire leaned forward and kissed him, a gesture that surprised them both with its boldness. When they parted, she whispered, That's a yes. The door to the hotel opened and Mara emerged, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She had been napping after the long day of questioning. Pa Claire. She looked between them, noting their clasped hands, the lingering closeness. Her small face lit with understanding. Are you going to be my ma now? For real? Claire opened her arms and Mara rushed into them. If that's what you want, she said softly. "It's what I always wanted," the child declared with absolute certainty. "That's why I wrote those letters." Eli chuckled, drawing both of them into his embrace. "Seems we have a matchmaker in the family." Family. The word settled into Claire's heart, fitting perfectly, as if a space had always existed there, just waiting to be filled. They were married 2 weeks later in Silver Creek's newly constructed church, with Sheriff Jensen giving the bride away, and Mara serving as both flower girl and self-appointed wedding planner. The entire town turned out for the celebration, a community coming together to welcome its newest official member. As autumn painted the Wyoming wilderness in hues of gold and amber, they rebuilt. The new cabin rose on the site of the old, larger and sturdier, with windows Claire insisted on ordering from Denver. "Because every home should have proper light," she declared. Eli didn't argue, recognizing that this Boston woman was bringing her own touches to their frontier life. The gold claim proved as rich as Jensen had predicted. Not a bonanza that would make them instant millionaires, but a steady, productive vein that promised security and comfort for years to come. Eli hired miners to help with the extraction, establishing a reputation as a fair employer who shared profits with his workers. Claire, meanwhile, found her own place in the community. Her education and legal knowledge gleaned from years at her father's side made her a natural advisor for the town's growing population. Soon she was drafting contracts, settling disputes, and helping new arrivals navigate the complexities of mining claims. "You could have been a lawyer in your own right," Eli observed one evening as she reviewed incorporation papers for Silver Creek's first bank. Claire smiled, thinking of her father. "In another time, perhaps. But I'm not sure I would have found as much satisfaction in a Boston courtroom as I do here." She glanced around their cabin at Mara doing her lessons by the fire, at the comfortable furnishings that blended Eastern refinement with frontier practicality. "This is where I was meant to be." As winter settled over the mountains, bringing snow and the quiet isolation of the season, Claire found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this place. From the elegant drawing rooms of Boston to a Wyoming mining town, from desperate flight to newfound purpose. The path had been neither straight nor easy, but it had led to something genuine, a life built on truth rather than appearances. One snowy evening, as Eli taught Mara to play checkers by the fire, Claire slipped away to their bedroom and retrieved a small wooden box from beneath the bed. Inside lay her father's silver watch, carefully preserved. Beside it now, she placed the worn envelope containing the letters that had first brought her west, Mara's innocent deception that had changed all their lives. As she closed the box, tucking it safely away for future generations to discover, Claire thought of promises, those broken, those kept, and those still being fulfilled. Her father had promised her a life of security and position, a promise shattered by circumstance and corruption. Eli had promised his late wife to build a future for their daughter, a promise he had kept through hardship and loss. And Claire had made her own promises now to Eli, to Mara, to herself, to build something lasting in this wild, beautiful land, to create a home where truth and courage were valued above all else, to love this family that had claimed her heart as surely as Eli had claimed his patch of Wyoming earth. Outside, snow fell softly, blanketing the new town in pristine white. Inside, warmth and laughter filled the cabin that had risen from ashes and determination. Claire returned to the main room, settling beside Eli on the bench he had crafted with his own hands. "King me!" Mara crowed triumphantly, having maneuvered one of her pieces to Eli's back row. Eli groaned in mock despair. "Outfoxed by my own daughter. My reputation as checkers champion is ruined." "Seems the Matthews women have a talent for strategy," Claire observed with a smile, Eli's arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer. "Matthew's women," he repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." As the fire crackled and the snow continued its silent descent outside Claire Evans, Matthews knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true vein of gold not in the mountain's heart, but in the hearts that beat beside hers in this frontier home. Some promises, she reflected, were meant to be broken so that truer ones could take their place. And some journeys, no matter how difficult, led exactly where they were meant to, not to the destinations we planned, but to the homes we never knew we were seeking. The end.